Chapter 26. The first rule of study group is Kaminari, come on. Kirishima rolls his eyes. Don't talk about study group, Kaminari finishes, snickering, which prompts Kirishima to groan loudly. Or, come on, Kirishima. I would have thought you'd like that movie. You're all about manly man stuff, aren't you? Yeah, not fake manly, Kirishima informs him. There's a difference between manliness and being an entitled dude, bro. That's true, Jiru says, straight-faced. Just look at Bakugo, he's like the poster child for toxic masculinity. You want to say that to my face, you dandling fuck? I just did. After the side, Izuku takes a deep breath and ignores the prickling up his spine when Bakugo starts yelling again. He takes another deep breath and counts to 10, then continues until he reaches 35 and a tap on his arm jolts him back to the present. Are you all right? Todoroki asks him mildly. Peachy, he answers. It comes out a great deal more serene than he feels and is not entirely sure it matches whatever is showing on his face. Ray isn't fooled if the conciliatory shoulder padding is any clue and Kaminari and Yororozu are giving him odd looks. He presses his hands together in front of his face, finger tips whitening. After a moment, once he feels that his feelings are properly leashed, he lets his hands drop to his sides again. Why is he so upset? He gets along with most of them. Ojiro and Kirishima he even tentatively considers friends. He likes them and he hopes they like him too. It's only Bakugo who sets the hard, heavy pit in his stomach, so why does it bother him that they've all tagged along? A loudly clearing throat turns every head toward Ida. Everything else aside, he says. Kaminari does make a good point. Kaminari blinks. They do. He does. Jiru asks. Yes. Well. We weren't expecting to have so many people involved, so perhaps things would run more smoothly if we set some ground rules. Rule 1 is don't talk about. Give it a rest, Kaminari, Ojiro sighs. Maybe we should include that, Todoroki mutters, too quietly for anyone but Izuku to hear. Talking about it is what led to a quarter of the class inviting themselves. Izuku coughs out a quiet laugh that can still reasonably be mistaken for a cough. Hey, Deku. Todoroki. Uraraka pipes up. This is kind of your thing. What do you two think? Well, the only real rule we have is that we don't use quirks, Izuku answers with a shrug. Because otherwise it'd be, you know, kind of illegal. And the fight stops if one of us wants to stop, Todoroki adds. Immediately, no questions asked. You know what? Izuku says, slipping his backpack from his shoulders. Let me get out my notebook and write some of these down. Over the next 10 minutes, they cobble together a list of 6 basic rules. Well, technically there are only 4, but Izuku writes, don't talk about study group as the first 2, if only to get Kaminari to stop trying to make that jerk work. He's barely finished writing serious injuries that would require recovery goal mean the match is over and the instigator is banned when the nitroglycerine on Bakugo's palms erupts with his impatience and Izuku's pen scores a dark line across the page that nearly rips through the paper entirely. Come on already, he snarls. The only reason why I came in the first fucking place was because there was supposed to be some actual fighting happening. I'm not here to waste my time talking all day. That's probably enough for now anyway, Yororozu says, ignoring his outburst. We can establish more rules as the situation calls for it. We still haven't decided to structure this, Ida says. I doubt we can all spar at the same time the way we do in class, because then it's far more difficult to enforce these rules. That sparks another discussion/argument, and Izuku can feel Bakugo's impatience mounting. He's not entirely sure how his and Todoroki's bi-weekly sparring practice has morphed into this cumbersome production, but the ball is rolling and is not about to stop it when they might be onto something. Hey. He twitches at the sound of Bakugo's voice, so close to him so suddenly. Menace drips from his words like molten iron. Get one thing straight, Deku, I see what you're fucking doing, and it's not gonna work. Izuku swallows against the lump in his throat. I think that's 2 things, actually. Shut the fuck up, Deku, Bakugo snarls, heedless of the fact that just a few feet away, a little girl ghost's patience is also wearing dangerously thin. You think you can mouth off like you're better than me just because you've been sneaking around with half-face for extra practice? Get fucking real. SC, the funny thing about that is, he's starting to stammer. It's severely impacting his ability to sound breezy and carefree. These, sparring practice sessions that me and Todoroki have been doing. I actually have nothing to do with you. Don't talk like you're above it all, you little shit. Bakugo snaps. You're not fucking better than me. Midoriya never said he was. Ida says, leaving off trying to guide the discussion. Bakugo barely looks at him as he snaps back. Can it, Four Eyes, this is between me and Deku. No it isn't, Izuku says, trying not to raise his voice over the sudden rushing noise in his ears. There's nothing between us. Without thinking, he shifts back. Kirishima's looking over, opening his mouth, probably to try and placate Bakugo. More people are getting involved, and that's the last thing he wants, to drag his friends into his and Bakugo's dark, muddied history. So he shifts back, turns away to put distance between himself and Bakugo, and finds it easier to speak when Todoroki and Uraraka fall in his line of vision instead. Anyway, if we are gonna get started we should decide. Quit blowing me off, Deku, and Bakugo's hand closes on his upper arm. There's a split second in which nothing happens, and within it Izuku believes, for that minuscule increment of time, that it's finally getting better. That maybe, this time, he can react to a simple grip on his arm like a functioning human being. But then he realizes that the reason why it feels as if nothing happens is that it's silent, and the reason why it's silent is that his ears are so thick with white noise that he can't hear a thing. He's staring at Bakugo, face blank, as Bakugo's mouth moves and Izuku hears none of the words coming out of it. He blinks, his ears pop, and the first thing he hears is, "Then fight me." What? The grip tightens and terror drills into his mind like an ice pick through his skull. Rei jerks into view like she's been shocked, and her face melts away to something skeletal and malevolent. Darkness creeps into the edges of his vision and Bakugo won't let go. I said fight me. Red eyes bore into him, burning points of baleful light. You here to fucking spar or not, Deku? Fight me. Let go. The words are out before he can stop them, and a mouthful of balm nearly follows them. Are you hearing me? Whoa. And then Kirishima is between them, his hardened grip closing on Bakugo's wrist. That's enough, okay? Come on, Bakugo, you said you'd be cool about this. I never fucking said that, Bakugo growls. We are here to practice, remember? Kirishima goes on, ignoring him. There's a difference between training and just picking a fight. The hell there is. Rei's patience snaps and Izuku's is burned with her enraged screams. Coved finger claws plunge into Bakugo's chest and the words stutter in his mouth before petering out to nothing. Red eyes widen until they are fully ringed with white, the crushing iron grip leaves Izuku's arm and he remembers what it feels like to have lungs. His best and oldest friend hovers between him and Bakugo and his vision clears. The only darkness he sees now is what gathers around her, as dense and heavy as a miniature black hole. Fine. It's not confidence that forces an answer from Izuku. It's not even anger. But in that moment, he looks around and finds everyone staring at him. Alarmed. Confused. And he wants to duck out, he wants to turn and go straight home, but if he does then people will wonder why, they'll ask questions, they'll want to know why Bakugo makes him act like this, why he makes Bakugo act like this, and... So he does what he knows he would do if he weren't so terribly afraid of Bakugo. If you want to spar so bad, then fine, he says, and is proud of how light his voice is. It's easy to be brave when he's surrounded by friends, surrounded by Rei, with Bakugo's grasp only a memory and a light ache in his arm. No need to throw a fit over it. His confidence is like a cloud of smoke, swelling and spreading, but only as insubstantial wisps. A light swat would clear it away. Hey, I want to spar someone first. Uraraka breaks in, and her high voice cuts through the fog still hanging heavy in his skull. I mean, it's only fair, right? Fair how? Kaminari asks. How about the fact that Ida and her were actually invited, she says dryly. More than a few of the others exchange sheepish looks. Jiru isn't one of them. Wait a sec, she says, stepping in. So are we gonna take turns on this, or just break up into pairs or whatever and do our own thing? We still haven't decided. Take turns. Kaminari calls out. Take turns. We should totally take turns so we can watch each other fight. Man, you are really fixated on this fight club thing, Ojiro mutters. It makes sense, though, Uraraka pipes up. If we watch, then we can demonstrate stuff and critique each other, right? And act as collective referees, Ida agrees. Not that I don't trust you all, of course. But more than one of us have had a history of getting carried away with practice bouts. Bakugo snarls wordlessly. That's putting it lightly, Jiru mutters. Besides, we do it that way in class because we have teachers supervising us, Yaoyorozu adds. And if we are going to do this ourselves, then we are going to have to keep each other in check. So, spectating each sparring match is the best way to do it. Okay, cool. Kirishima brings his hands together sharply. It's settled, then. Sure is. Uraraka says cheerfully. Fight me. Kirishima blinks. What? Come on, spar with me. She bounces on the balls of her feet, eyes glinting eagerly. There are some moves I learned from Gunhead that I didn't get to try out in class. It doesn't take long for Kirishima's surprise to turn to delight. All right. Bring it on, Uraraka. He happily ignores the impatient scowl that Bakugo tries to beam into the side of his head and joins Uraraka in the middle of the rough semicircle that the others are forming. Izuku ends up with Todoroki standing between him and Bakugo, and he has to wonder if that's just how the cards fell or if he's instinctively hiding. His stomach turns at the thought, but he swallows his shame and continues to look at Uraraka, at Kirishima, at anyone who isn't Bakugo. Privately, a small part of him wishes that Uraraka and Kirishima's match would last the full 2 or 3 hours before he can reasonably excuse himself. One of you fuckers better hurry up and get your ass kicked, Bakugo snarls. We don't have all day. I'll spar against whoever wins, Todoroki says, and his facial expression doesn't even twitch when Bakugo screams in inarticulate rage. Tape on Uraraka's fingers, one on each hand, keeps her from activating her quirk by accident. Izuku watches eagerly as his two friends trade blows. The change in Uraraka is startling. It was hard not to notice it when they were sparring in class, and it's just as obvious when he's on the outside looking in. If anything, he can see it with more clarity like this. Instead of having to observe lightning fast and react, he can stand back and let his analytical eye take in the progress that his friend shows. Whatever teaching strategies Gun had used, they worked. Still, Kirishima eventually floors her first by virtue of a more solid center of gravity, and Uraraka demands that they extend it to best of 3. They have an audience now, not just classmates, but curious spirits wandering through the park are stopping by to observe. He's glad of that. Rei gets bored easily, Tensei didn't come, and Izuku can't give her his full attention when he's surrounded by his living friends like this. The cheering rings in Izuku's ears when Uraraka wins the next round, and then the third. There's a pause for a break, and a friendly tussle between Kaminari and Ojiro evolves into a sparring match all on its own. True to the rules they've established, Ojiro keeps his tail out of it as best he can, but even with that handicap he still knocks Kaminari off his feet. Bakugo stews quietly in the background and does little more than scowl. Gradually, Izuku relaxes again. You're telegraphing too much, Todoroki says, the second time he beats Uraraka. Izuku winces on her behalf. It's not that Izuku's a better fighter than her, but he's simply been sparring with Todoroki longer and has learned his friend's towels. He can match the feeling of Todoroki's weight shifting to most of the moves in his friend's arsenal, and he has no doubt that Todoroki has learned his rhythm just as well, but he still has a distinct advantage that Uraraka lacks. How do you figure? Uraraka's breathing hard, both from exertion and from hitting the ground so roughly. You swing wide when you're about to make a move, most of the time, Todoroki answers. It's easy to tell what you're going to do next. It's not as much of a problem when you fight Kirishima because he does the exact same thing. Hey. Besides that, you tire out too quickly, Todoroki continues, ignoring Kirishima. You use too much energy for too little. You need to move more efficiently. Uraraka chews her lower lip, frowning thoughtfully. How, though? Todoroki's brows knit together. It's hard to explain. It's mostly intuitive for you at this point, Yaoyorozu says. Isn't it? You haven't had to think about it in a while. More or less, Todoroki says, shrugging in a way that's almost apologetic. I think I have some ideas, Ojiro offers. Seem you're a second, Uraraka, I think I can help. Study group is, in Izuku's humble opinion, a success. Any worries he'd had over sabotaging himself by only sparring with one person are rendered moot. Sparring with Todoroki is vastly different from sparring with Ojiro, who in turn is vastly different from Uraraka or Kirishima. All four of them manage to drag him into a few rounds, and Kaminari wheedles him into showing him a few throws. They are almost an hour and a half in, and Izuku isn't sure how much longer Bakugo will allow himself to be stalled when his phone rings from where he left it with his bag. He's hot and sweaty and liberally grass-stained as he retrieves it and answers the call. "Hello, Izuku," his mother's voice greets him cheerfully. Somewhere in the background, something breaks. Maybe glass, maybe ceramic. "Are you having fun with your friends?" "Yeah, Mom, is something wrong?" "I'm afraid so," she says, sounding contrite. "It's Mr. Kurosawa again. I think he's having a bit of a fit. He's just started throwing things again. Only the cheap corner store plates, though, so don't worry because I can always..." A distant clatter drowns out her next words. It sounds a bit like a full drum set tipping over. "Oh dear, he's gotten to the pan cabinet. I'm so sorry to pull you out, Izuku, but you always know how to talk him down." "It's okay, Mom, I'll be right over." Izuku hands up, sighing a little. It's either relief or faint exasperation, he isn't sure. Rei, hearing him, darts back from where she's been trying to catch ladybugs to join him. "Sorry, guys, I gotta go. Something came up." He tries not to make it obvious that he's very deliberately not looking at Bakugo when he says this. It doesn't matter, because Bakugo's already dubious patience snaps. "You seriously ducking out now?" he demands. "Said I'd fight you," Izuku answers, purposely keeping his voice light. "Never said when." To the others he offers a sheepish look. "Sorry, guys, I thought I'd have more time." "It's cool, man," Kirishima says with a grin. "You okay with us carrying on without YA?" I don't have a problem with it." Izuku looks to Todoroki instinctively, but his friend simply shrugs at him and goes back to watching Ojiro critique Kaminari's technique. Anyway. I'd better get going. Want some of us to tag along?" Uraraka suggests. "We could still hang out, Deku." "And not a good idea," he says. "Pipes are being repaired. The guy's trying to raise his prices, so my mom wants me home to help haggle him back down." "Darn. Maybe some other time, then." "Yeah, maybe," he answers. "See you in class, guys." The jog from the park to home isn't a long one, and Izuku is barely out of breath when he reaches his door. Rei is already inside before he gets it unlocked, and he can hear a commotion still going on within. A waft of air freshener scent hits his nostrils as he walks in. It's the citrusy kind that Marina likes. Mom must have gone out and bought more. Further into the apartment, he can hear Kurosawa's familiar panicked sobbing before something clatters into the wall and Rei lets out an unearthly shriek. With a sigh, Izuku jogs to investigate. The kitchen looks like a war zone. A few of the cheap dishes from the pantry lie broken on the floor, along with at least half the contents of the cookware cabinet. Pots, pans, saucepans, and lids are strewn about the place, and his mother is off to the side, out of range of any more projectiles while she tries to clear away the edge of the mess. Kurosawa flits about, blinking in and out of view, screaming and crying out while Rei tries in vain to chase and corral him. Blood pours from the wounds that killed him, and with a sweep of his arm he sends a row of spice shakers flying. "Sorry, Mom," Izuku says, raising his voice to be heard when Kurosawa slams a cabinet door. "Kurosawa. Mr. Kurosawa, please, you're all right." No, please, get away from me." It's always like this when Kurosawa has one of these poltergeist episodes. He forgets everything that's happened between today and the day he died. He returns to that night, and his blood spatters the floor all over again. Rei finally pounces and catches him, forcing him to stay in one place. He struggles wildly, but he can't melt and mold and shift his form the way she can. If he wriggles free, she catches him again and holds him still. He quiets for a moment, transparent tears pouring down his face, and Izuku seizes the opportunity. "Kurosawa, you're dead." The ghost stutters in Rei's grip like a broken video, sobbing hoarsely in the center of the kitchen. Izuku swallows the taste of bile as it creeps into his mouth. In his more lucid moments, Kurosawa has told him that he once lived in this apartment, decades ago, and he died in it too. Not in the kitchen, though. He hid in the closet when he heard robbers come in, and they panicked and killed him when they found him by accident. They already killed you, Mr. Kurosawa, Izuku tells him. He's lost count of how many times he's had to remind him. They can't hurt you anymore. No one can. Kurosawa cries out as if his heart is breaking. Rei lets go, and the kitchen is empty. Marino and Mrs. Matsuda peek out from the hallway, but don't come out. His mother gets to her feet, sighing in faint exasperation. I was saying the very same thing to him before you even came home, she says. They listened to you far better. Rei held him still for me. Thanks, Rei. Izuku sets about picking up the scattered cookware. His mother joins him briskly. The kitchen is a mess, but it's not so bad when there's two of them. Did you have fun, she asks. With your friends? Yeah, it was pretty cool. A bunch of my classmates showed up. Izuku opens one of the lower cabinets and starts organizing pans into a neat stack. That's good. Make sure you throw that shirt in the wash, okay? The faster you do it, the easier it is to get those grass stains out. Okay, Mom. I'll make sure to use the stronger detergent. Oh dear, did he come back? Huh? Izuku looks over his shoulder to find his mother staring in concern at Rei. The latter is picking her way through the mess, picking up broken pieces of ceramic. To his mother's eyes, it must look like the fragments are floating on their own. Oh no, that's just Rei, she's trying to help. Waste baskets under the sink, Rei. His friend dutifully opens the cabinet and drops the broken plates in. Oh, his mother says softly. That's new, isn't it? I thought you said it was hard for them to pick things up and move them. It usually is, Izuku replies as Rei continues clearing away the ceramic shards. I dunno, I think Rei's getting stronger. Kurosawa too, his mother says. That's easily the worst it's ever been. Usually he just knocks a few things over or pulls everything off the hangers in the closet. First time I've ever seen things fly. I guess they are all getting stronger, Izuku says softly. Around me. He purses his lips. Sorry. Don't apologize for your own quirk, dear. It's both of them, he says softly. She looks up, arms laden with kitchenware. Pardon? I mean, Izuku pauses. This quirk that All Might gave me. It doesn't just make my body stronger, it makes my quirk stronger, too. All the pans are back in their proper place, so he closes the cabinet. There have been things. Little things, like Kurosawa throwing things or Rei picking things up more easily than before. But there's also, I've seen ghosts, Rei especially, touch people. And just looking at their faces, I could swear that they feel her. Not the way I can, but they feel something. He rocks back on his heels. Rei told me that she made Todoroki get to me faster in Hosa, but I'm not sure how, and I don't know how to ask Todoroki if he felt her. And at the USJ, Aizawa-sensei fell unconscious and I saw him too. He wasn't even dead, but I saw him and I talked to him, and he doesn't remember any of it now, but sometimes I catch him looking at me like he's trying to remember to tell me something. I can't prove anything, but sometimes I wonder if I would have seen him if I didn't have One for All. His mother is quiet for a moment after he finishes, silently turning things end over end in her head. Rei has cleared away almost all the broken dishes when MPM finally raises her head and speaks. Izuku, have you considered, well, telling anyone? Fear lands him like a mallet, and in an instant he finds himself standing on the precipice, one step, one wrong move, and he'll pitch forward into the crashing waves. He feels things, crawling things, cold fingertips spidering up and down his arms, his spine, his neck. But it's not ghosts this time, no, just fear. Just cold dread and terror, locking tight around his throat and his heart like a noose of barbed wire. Can't say I have, he says. Before I say anything else, I need you to know, at the end of the day, I won't force you. And I won't tell you who you should or shouldn't trust. She purses her lips. I want you to feel safe, and right now, keeping this a secret makes you feel safe. You'd have to get me good and desperate before I ever touched that. But I've seen you, Izuku. You're so bright and happy, and you always were, but never at school and never with other living people. He can see tears glistening briefly in her eyes. But now it's not like it was with Katsuki. It's like they raise you higher, sweetheart. They do, he whispers. His voice is hoarse. And I can't risk losing that. Her face falls. I understand, she says softly. And I'll support you, no matter what. But Izuku, at least consider telling All Might. I have, he answers. Considered it, I mean. I think about it every day. But I can't, Mon. I just can't, yet. He leaves the yet in. Might as well allow little hope for the future. Aizawa lets his scarf mask how he sighs deeply as he feels the newly excited fervor buzzing among his students. It's not like he wasn't expecting this. Saying the phrase, summer training camp in the woods out loud to 20 teenagers is the fastest way to wake up a room full of 20 teenagers. The eagerness will stick with them over the next few weeks, and with any luck it will keep them energized and motivated throughout their exams. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't a little eager as well. It won't be all fun and games. The camp is a decent opportunity to gather the first years and test them in new ways, and the heroes they have lined up to help with training are competent, trustworthy, and enthusiastic. His students are enthusiastic as well, though sometimes. You're really trying my goddamn nerves, shitrad, he is Bakuga raw, and pauses in the hallway before his students can spot him. It's been a while since he's seen Bakuga work himself up into a proper self-righteous fury. You're gonna eat shit before the term is over, you cocky little bastard. As Aizawa watches, Midoriya spends a moment staring straight through Bakuga before turning and cold-shouldering him, which predictably does nothing to improve Bakuga's mood. Aizawa sighs. Bakuga's worse than ever, and the exam stress probably isn't helping. His interactions with Midoriya have never been anything but turbulent. Something's going to have to be done about that. The students in Class 1A are the only ones getting into the spirit of things, either. Class 1B is as earnest as ever, every bit as determined and strong for all that they didn't share in the events at the USJ. Though, he will have to have a word with Sekijuro and some of the other teachers if that Monoma kid keeps trying to stir up drama. Heaven knows they don't need yet another trigger for Bakuga's temper running around. Ms. Kenta can't babysit him all the time. And speaking of teachers, by some ordained miracle, All Might still has time left in his hero form by the last period of the day, and he takes the opportunity to address the students with some last-minute sage advice. The advice itself is good. Valuable, even. But still, watching from an objective viewpoint, it's all Aizawa can do to keep from rolling his eyes. All Might makes his dearth of experience painfully obvious whenever he steps into teach. Any teacher would be lying if they said they didn't have favorite students, but at least most of them can hide it reasonably well. Not so with All Might. Midoriya Izuku is his favorite, and everyone with a bare minimum of half a brain and one eye can tell. It makes perfect sense, of course. Midoriya may be quiet, skittish, unpredictable, and downright strange at times, but Aizawa can see the seeds of that same dogged sense of duty that All Might has in spades. Midoriya is brave, selfless to the point of being self-destructive, and brimming with far more single-minded determination than should reasonably fit in a body that size, and Aizawa is willing to bet money that All Might recognizes a kindred spirit when he sees one. Just one that's a little more fidgety than he is. But Aizawa sees something new now. Class is more or less over now, and All Might is still hanging around. Really, how much longer does he have in that form, and chatting with students? He keeps looking to Midoriya as if to check that he's still there, but to his credit he's giving due attention to everyone present. Midoriya catches his eye, and when All Might looks, the boy's hands curl and gesture. This, by itself, is nothing extraordinary. Midoriya gesticulates more than anyone else who isn't Ida, and Aizawa suspects that he'd go mute if his hands were tied. Except, for the first time, Aizawa recognizes it. It's not that different from Midoriya's usual nervous hand-wringing. Midoriya's hands jump and fidget almost every time Aizawa happens to glance his way. But now there's a clear purpose and direction to the movements, as clear and deliberate as if Midoriya were shaping the air like clay, and most of all it's recognizable. The motions are brief, and to Aizawa's vague surprise, All Might responds in kind. Since when does All Might know sign language? He wonders, but that's hardly as pressing a concern as what they are actually saying. Aizawa's knowledge of sign language is limited to what is useful in stealth missions with other heroes who happen to know it, and he'll be the first to admit that his comprehension isn't the best. That's the main reason he never recognized Midoriya's fidgets as sign, much less understood them. Probably just more muttering, given Midoriya's verbal habits. But now they are clear enough and simple enough for Aizawa to pick up on them, and what he reads in the gestures has him sidling up to All Might once the students are out of earshot. So is there a reason why Midoriya knows about your time limit, he asks, and tries not to feel too smug when All Might startles like a baby deer. It's an odd and awkward action for such a hulking figure. What? All Might almost shouts, then forcibly lowers his voice. What exactly do you mean, Aizawa? I saw your little exchange just now, Aizawa says flatly. How many of the students know, and why wasn't I made aware? All Might looks a little perplexed. Just the one, he says at last. Only Midoriya, none of the others. In an act of unmatched self-control, Aizawa manages not to roll his eyes. Really? All Might, I know you like the kid and I understand why, but confiding in him about something like that is taking the favoritism a little far, don't you think? I didn't, All Might splutters, clearly flustered. I didn't confide in him, Aizawa. How do you find out, then? All Might blinks at him. Well, that is. USJ, Midoriya says from behind him, and he damn near manages to sneak up on Aizawa. He hears the boy coming, but it's a closer thing than it is with most students. Aizawa turns and looks at him sharply. What was that? Midoriya looks up from his phone. Aizawa can see him browsing gifs of baby animals from here. It was at the USJ, Midoriya replies, and oh, that's why All Might has that hand-up look on his face. No one likes to remind Aizawa of the time a villain smeared him onto the pavement in front of a handful of terrified students. I was right next to him when the teachers showed up and ran off the rest of the villains, but my legs were sort of useless, so he couldn't really make me leave before his time ran out. That must have been a shock, Aizawa says, and his voice sounds deadpan even by his own standards. I think I screamed, Midoriya replies just as nonchalantly, glancing down at a moving photograph of a kitten falling off of a pillar. But I did have 2 broken legs, so I don't think anyone thought anything of it. All Might looks pleasantly sheepish, and Aizawa tucks away this new piece of information. It's good to know there's at least one student in his class that he doesn't need to be overcautious around concerning All Might's secret. And he supposes it's a comfort that the injured idiot has one more set of eyes to watch in. Not that Midoriya has a history of exercising caution, but All might as well take what he can get. Aizawa heaves a sigh and lets his usual disinterested mask fall back into place. You two deserve each other, he says flatly, and moves off again before either of them can reply. That was quick thinking, my boy. Izuku hums quietly and puts his phone away, all the while catching Ms. Shimoa's eye and trying to convey thanks for the warning through facial expressions alone. Not really, he admits. I've sort of had that one prepared. Oh? All Might raises an eyebrow at him. Izuku shifts in place uncomfortably, cursing his own modesty. I mean, sort of. Me knowing about your limit is pretty easy to excuse, and you never know, right? Something might come up, and, well, something just came up, just now. All Might looks thoughtful for a moment, before apparently deciding upon approval. Well, I will say that for heroes in general, especially considering our unique situation, that's just the sort of skill that's most useful for dealing with the press, young Midoriya. Izuku frowns. Lying. Sometimes. But mostly it's more like deflecting. Crafting your answers in such a way that it encourages people not to probe further. Oh, Izuku says softly, pensively. That really is perfect, isn't it? I can do that. In the blink of an eye, there's only one more week before the end of term exams. Academics have never been Izuku's weak point, but he still studies diligently at home, committing information and themes and mathematical formulas to memory. He won't gain anything by being overconfident. Yaoirosa is tutoring half the class at this point, covering subjects across the board. Majority Rule leads them to arrange another study group meeting after school on Wednesday. Somehow, it's gotten even more hectic than before. This is a good thing, right? Todoroki asks him under his breath. An improvement. Everyone who was at the previous meeting is here now, save for Kirishima, who ducked out for the sake of an extra evening of cramming, but word has spread. Tsuyu is here today, as well as Sira, Hagakure, Ashida, and to the consternation of every girl present, Mineta. Who the hell invited him? Jiru demands. I mean, technically nobody invited you guys last time, Uraraka points out. I'm not sure this is really an invitee kind of thing anymore. Whose side are you on? Jiru asks, quietly seething as Mineta nearly vibrates with excitement. I'm just saying. I guess it was nice before, just hanging out, Izuku answers with a shrug. But this is probably better in the long run. For actually figuring out hand-to-hand together. Especially since the practical exam is coming up and we technically don't know for sure what's in it. Millimeter, Todoroki takes in the scene for another beat. Could do without Mineta. Yeah, Izuku sighs, relieved that Todoroki said it before he did. It's your first time here. Kaminari calls out, pointing to the newcomers. That means you gotta fight. It's in the rules. No, it's not, Kaminari, shut up. Jiru yells. In spite of this, the first sparring match to break out is between Uraraka and Tsuyu. Rei cheers in static from the sidelines as the girls take their positions and the match kicks off. Izuku can see Tsuyu biting down on her lip to keep from using her tongue. Mineta's wordless whooping turns into suggestions. Said suggestions continue until Tsuyu forgoes the notework rule to seize him around the waist with her tongue and shot put him halfway across the park. Izuku wants to watch the whole match, but a cool hand descends on his shoulder and he looks up to see Ida Tensei watching him. The late hero and Jinyan barely bats an eye when Rei clambers up to sit on his shoulders. Izuku hasn't heard much from Ida's older brother. He doesn't hover by Ida's side quite as constantly as before. Izuku assumes he has other things to attend to, other people to check up on. But he's here now, and Izuku grins at the sight of him. Hey, Tensei says. You holding up okay? Sure, Izuku says under his breath, barely moving his lips. Why do you ask? Why do I? Are you kidding, Midoriya? I really should have asked sooner. Tensei looks away briefly. But I've been keeping busy lately, going around checking up on my old sidekicks and stuff, and after Hosa, I wasn't sure if you wanted the company or wanted to sort things out for yourself. Rei says you've been having a little trouble. Just bad dreams, Izuku murmurs. Nothing I haven't dealt with before. Tensei's about to reply when Rei hisses and he looks up. Watch out, he warns. Izuku turns to follow his gaze and Bakugo's in his face before he has time to draw back. We are next. It's not a growl or a snarl. Bakugo says two words the way a hammer strikes an anvil, short and blunt and bricking no argument. You and me. No more putting this off, Decker. Okay. His heart jumps to his throat and sticks there. All at once his nerves are ringing with tension and he fights to keep it off of his face. By some miracle, he manages to hold that as Uraraka and Tsuyu finish their match and Bakugo balls his way into the middle of things. He imagines that his face is made of glass, smooth and cool and unmoving, slippery enough that nothing catches on it, nothing sticks. Everything slides right off, leaving the cold, polished surface unmarked and pristine. Bakugo's knuckles crack when he makes fists and Izuku remembers that glass is transparent and it breaks easily. It's too late to worry about that now, facing Bakugo and surrounded by people both living and dead. As he always does when he needs to, Izuku files it away to deal with later. Bakugo, as always, starts with a strong right. Izuku learned over 3 years of middle school to avoid those hands like his life depended on it, and there were moments in which he was sure it did. In this moment he tells himself, no quirks, no quirks. He won't use his quirk, but his ears ring with phantom explosions and he ducks out of the way of the punch just in time to catch the other full on the shoulder. Landing the first hit galvanizes Bakugo into action and the fight starts in earnest. Immediately, it's starting poorly. Izuku is on the defensive, dodging and weaving and deflecting, or at least trying to. Bakugo's fists hurt, whether Izuku takes a hit or knocks it away. He lets them come anyway. There's a rhythm to it. A pattern, even if Bakugo doesn't realize it. Izuku ducks and waits and dodges and watches until Bakugo's breath hisses between teeth clenched in frustration. Stop screwing around and fight me already, Decker. Or are you too much of a little bitch to throw a punch at me? Tension coils along his spine at Bakugo's words. Izuku fakes a punch at Bakugo's throat, and when Bakugo catches it, Izuku follows up with a knee to the gut. He's rewarded with a grunt of pain and lashes out again, only for Bakugo to catch his other fist. "You think your fucking cheat shots are gonna work on me?" Bakugo grits out, and Izuku fights against bile and nausea and ringing in his ears as he struggles to get free. To his surprise, Bakugo lets go. It's not for the sake of kindness, though. Izuku can tell by the look in Bakugo's eyes. He's not being nice, he just isn't done making his point yet. A sharp jab splits Izuku's lip, his heart rate spikes, and that's when he throws caution to the wind. He's going to lose. The fight's only just started, but he knows instinctively that he's going to lose, just like he always loses. The tension spreads from his spine to his fingertips. He feels it in his teeth, buzzing and tingling and uncomfortably hot. He's frustrated. So he fights. It's the kind of fighting that he won't be proud of when he looks back on it later. He pulls out every dirty trick, remembers every cruel weak point he's been taught. He aims low, he aims for the throat, he aims thumbs at Bakugo's eyes, he tries to get around behind him to jam his elbow into the spot where his kidneys are. It's low, it's dirty, and maybe he's fighting this way because he doesn't want to fight for real anymore, if he ever did. Fighting Bakugo doesn't make him feel like a hero, because Bakugo has a talent for making him feel low. He wants to stop this stupid match, he wants to call for Rei, he wants to talk to Tensei or Miss Shimoa or Uraraka or Todoroki or Ida. He wants to not be here anymore, and that isn't fair. These sparring sessions were supposed to be a break from the pressure of school, a chance to train and practice under friendly eyes, to talk to his friend and make stupid jokes and challenge himself to get Todoroki to crack a smile. They are supposed to be safe, and Izuku nearly retches when Bakugo's fist makes full contact with his stomach. While he's bent double, Bakugo grabs him in a headlock, and his vision goes white. "Give up, Deku," Bakugo hisses, inches from his ear. "You're never gonna catch up, got it? No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, I'm always gonna be better." Bakugo wrecks everything he touches, but only the things that belong to Izuku. Every milestone Izuku reaches, Bakugo tramples. Every safe place Izuku carves out, he invades. The arm around his neck tightens. But Izuku isn't choking yet. He can still breathe, just about. "I said give up, Deku," Bakugo growls, and there are other voices now, calling foul, yelling at Bakugo to stop, but Bakugo ignores them. "I'll let go if you give up. Now say it, you worthless, fucking goddammit." The taste of mingled sweat and blood foul his tongue, and then the arm around his neck is gone. His teeth ache when Bakugo's arm wrenches free, and Izuku finds arms holding him back. Dark hair whips against his face. Rei. Rei is standing in front of him, and from the sound of her, she's angry. He isn't sure how strong she's gotten by now, but if Bakugo comes close again, he hates to think of what she'll do. The fight is over, and Izuku goes limp. Across from him, Bakugo strains against Kaminari, Zero, and Ida. He's clutching his wrist and glaring at Izuku with raw hatred in his eyes. "Did you just bite me, shitrag?" "Oh." Izuku spits into the grass until his mouth is dry. Someone pushes a water bottle into his hand, and he rinses. "Okay, new rule," Jiru says. "Midoriya and Bakugo aren't allowed to fight each other anymore, because what the hell, you two?" "Sorry." Is he shaking? He hopes he isn't shaking, because there are still people holding onto him. Oh, that's Uraraka and Ojiro, and there's Todoroki stepping in front of him, a physical barrier just in case he or Bakugo try to pick up where they left off. It won't be Izuku. Izuku didn't want this fight to happen at all. Why yes, that was. Ida releases Bakugo reluctantly, and only when it's clear that he's not going to try to charge again. "I think it would be best if you both avoided sparring in the future." Uraraka and Ojiro let go of him, and Izuku nearly sags to the ground then and there. He keeps his feet until Tensei appears at his side to steady him, and then he backs out to the edge again. "Sorry," he repeats. "Got carried away, let me just." He grabs his phone and nearly drops it twice as he checks it. They all have questions. They are all confused and alarmed, he can tell. Maybe one day he'll find a way to explain things to them. But for now, "My mom texted," he says, and doesn't even look up to see if anyone believes him. "Sorry, gotta go." Grabbing his things, he leaves the group in the park without a backward glance. No one stops him. Messages come to him over the rest of the day. He answers none of them. At school, the few attempts to ask him about the incident die away. The group doesn't meet again for the rest of the week, and Izuku trains and studies on his own. We've already predetermined who you'll be paired with and which teacher you'll be fighting for this exam, Principal Nezu explains. We took into account your grades, your familiarity, and your fighting styles and strategies. The matchups are as follows. Izuku's heart sinks when Todoroki and Yororozu are paired together for the practical exam. He would have liked to team up with Todoroki, but then, that wouldn't have been much of a challenge. And is partnered up with Uraraka enough that he doubts they would let them do it again. Oh, well. There's really only one person he knows he can't work with. What are the odds that? Midoriya Izuku-sensei says. You're with Bakugo. Rei shrieks loud enough that it feels like he's being stabbed in the eardrum, but Izuku simply gives a placid blink as the world comes crashing down around him. Chapter 27. S-sensei. Izuku glances up. The rest of the bus is more or less empty. Each exam will take place simultaneously at different UA training facilities, so the only passengers are himself and the two students he'll be evaluating. Yororozu and Todoroki should be an interesting matchup. They are both skilled fighters, but opposites in terms of skill sets. Todoroki is powerful but relies a little too much on brute force, while Yororozu is clever and analytical to the point of overthinking things and losing precious time. Moreover, Yororozu has been hesitant to assert herself recently, and Todoroki is often slow to notice the feelings of his classmates. A team-up like this should present an interesting challenge for them both. But Yororozu, for all her recent self-doubts, is speaking up now. She's twirling a pencil in her fingers, tapping it against the notepad in her lap, both of which she produced with her quirk at some point during the drive. She seems to be taking notes and drawing up ideas now. Yes, Yororozu. Forgive me if I'm being impertinent, but was it you said the matchups were predetermined by analyzing our abilities and familiarity with one another, right? They weren't randomized. He nods. Randomization is all very well for training exercises, but this is specifically an evaluation of your abilities. We made our choices carefully. Oh. Yororozu's eyes lower, and the tapping pencil increases speed. Well, maybe not carefully enough. Her eyes flicker toward Todoroki, who returns her glance before looking to Aizawa as well. Yororozu, I'm sure you and Todoroki will have no trouble collaborating for this exam. Oh, no, I mean yes, of course, she says quickly. We will, there's no trouble there. But with, some of the other matchups, well, one of the other matchups, your analysis may have been, the pencil twirls right out of her hand and clatters to the floor of the bus. Todoroki bends down to retrieve it and hand it back to her. Floored, she finishes. Aizawa blinks, takes in the worried expression that she directs toward the ground and the subtle furrow in Todoroki's brow. He sighs. You two should be worrying more about your own exam than Midoriya's. It's just, Yororozu blurts out. I know I'm only the assistant class rep, but I still know the whole class and how they get along with each other, and Midoriya and Bakugo don't. Putting them together is it's like oil on fire. I'm aware of that, Aizawa replies. That's part of why that particular matchup was chosen. Yororozu's jaw drops. What? Those two were chosen because they are on horrible terms, Aizawa explains. Hopefully, they'll be able to use this chance to grow in more than simply strength. He takes a deep breath. He has no obligation to explain highest decisions this early, especially since Bakugo and Midoriya's exam has little to do with them, but it would be better to put them at ease before their own test begins. Be that as it may, they'll be guided personally by All Might, whom they both hold in high regard, and both of them have the ability to work as a team. Whether or not they can use that ability in conjunction is up to them, and the entire purpose of testing them in this way. When he finishes his explanation, Yororozu's shoulders slump, but it looks less like relief and more like resignation. I understand your reasoning, she says quietly, and he can't place her tone. He doesn't like that he can't place her tone, it gives the impression that he's missing something. But still. But it doesn't make it any less of a terrible idea, Todoroki finishes for her. She winces at his bluntness. Aizawa heaves a sigh. If they are unable to put aside personal feelings to get the job done, then clearly they need more guidance. Determining that is the point of an evaluation like this. He'll get the job done, Todoroki says. He doesn't look as tense as Yororozu does, slouching a little against the back of his seat. But it's going to end badly. You should probably know that. Whatever you're trying to accomplish with this, whatever you want out of it, it's not going to happen. He says no more after that, and Yororozu returns to her notepad. Eventually, hesitantly, she scoots over to sit next to Todoroki and show him what she has written. She makes another pencil for him, and they communicate through writing, eliminating any risk of Aizawa eavesdropping on their planning. Not that he would have, if he had the chance. Now he's preoccupied. Now he's worried. You two want to play last letter. All Might doesn't get a response. If he expects a response, then he's giving them far more credit than Izuku thinks they probably deserve. He and Bakugo are sitting as far away from one another as possible. Bakugo's sitting in a seat facing the back of the bus, just so he doesn't have to look at them. Izuku does look at All Might and hopes he conveys enough of what he feels through his face alone. It's not a sure thing. Sometimes he feels so much that none of it really comes out and his face goes blank instead. This might be one of those times. Of course, nothing coming out of him is far preferable to, say, the contents of his stomach coming out of him. Jury's still out on whether or not he can keep that in. It doesn't feel right that he's scared of a school test, and the worst-case scenario in his mind goes so much farther than simply not passing. I'm sorry. Miss Shimoa is a cool, comforting presence as she sits down by him. Wish there was something I could do to change it. If it makes you feel any better, Tashi's not the one who threw you under the bus. Aizawa was the one who figured out the matchups. Izuku tucks his head in, using the mouth guard of his suit to hide the movement of his lips. Will you help me, he whispers. With this test? You asking me to help you cheat, kiddo? He shrugs. Heroes should use everything they have available. Seeing you as an aspect of my quirk. That makes you He can't think of a way to phrase this. Luckily, Miss Shimoa seems to understand. Makes me an asset, huh? He gives a tiny nod. Tell you what, she says, with a friendly squeeze of his shoulder. If Tashi tries to ambush you, I'll give you a yell, and we can laugh at all the funny faces he makes while he tries to figure out why he can't sneak up on you. How's that? In spite of the fear that churns beneath the surface, Izuku has to fight the smile off of his face. He angles his face away from All Might before murmuring, "Thanks, Miss Shimoa." She blinks at him, smiles fondly, and tugs gently on one of his curls. That's Nana to you, Munchkin. After everything I've told you, there's no need to be all formal with me. Okay, Ms. Nana. Fair enough. Thanks, he says. If you're there, maybe it won't be, sir. A small explosion from the back of the bus cuts him off. Deku, I swear to fuck if you don't shut up. I don't want to be here either, he says, and gets a stream of curses in return. That's hardly the best mindset to start with. If you two have any hope of passing, All Might admonishes them both. I'll explain the test once we arrive, but it would behoove you both to swallow your pride and try to get used to the idea of working together. Swallow his pride. Izuku's not sure he has enough pride to scrape together into a decent mouthful where Bakugo is concerned. He's not fast enough to smooth out his expression because All Might catches it. Less of that, young Midoriya, he says, gently chiding. It may be unpleasant, but remember that this is a test. Know what this is, Izuku blurts out, then stops himself. He forces his face to smooth emptiness again, though it's more and more of a struggle with each passing minute. This is exactly what I was actually afraid of. This is All Might. This is the nightmare scenario. Dramatic, maybe, but it's true. This is the worst nightmare he could possibly have that doesn't involve someone dying. All Might doesn't get the chance to reply because that's when the bus arrives. Izuku drags his feet on the way out of the bus and quickly regrets it. With All Might leading the way and Izuku dawdling, Bakugo has plenty of time to grab him and drag him close, heedless of the shallow breaths that hiss in and out of Izuku's throat. Fumbling, Izuku tries to claw Bakugo's hand off his arm, but his former friend's grip doesn't loosen until both Rei and Ms. Nana join in his efforts. They can't quite touch him, but he lets go all the same. Let's get one thing straight, Bakugo hisses, far too close to his face for Izuku to feel anything but sick with old fear. He forces himself blank, keeps his limbs loose and his hands at his sides. I don't want a fucking repeat of day 2, or the fucking sports festival, got it? None of your shitty tricks and no fucking games unless you want me to blast your slack-jawed fucking face off. I'm gonna win, and it's gonna be a total victory. They are not quite off the bus and Bakugo blocks his escape with one gauntleted arm. No more pointless fucking victories. Is this getting through your head, Deku? Don't fuck this up for me. His voice is too low for All Might to hear, but it drips with menace. Hurry it along, now. All Might calls. We are starting soon. Bakugo shoulders past him, heedless, probably, of the claw-fingered swipe that Ray aims at his back, and Izuku shakes his mind free of the tangled dark thorns before he follows. It's yet another one of UA's city replica training facilities. But while the obstacle course where they held the rescue race exercise was more industrial-based, this place closely resembles a residential district. A twisting, maze-like residential district, the center of which was their starting line. The test is simple enough. 30 minutes on the clock, armed with nothing but their costumes and a pair of handcuffs. All they have to do to pass is either get the handcuffs on All Might or get one of them out one of the exit gates. Best of all Might is already outfitted with suppressor cuffs to limit his quirk. Simple enough. If it's so simple, then why can't Izuku stop shaking? The test begins far too quickly, and All Might all but vanishes into the false city. Ms. Nana goes with him, and Izuku can only hope she keeps her word from before. Don't follow me, Bakugo snaps at him and sets off in her direction. It's a piece of advice that Izuku ignores in spite of his own better judgment. The only thing worse than having to work with Bakugo would be getting caught alone. It's bad enough in the eerie quiet, with Izuku jumping and fidgeting and eyeing every corner as if All Might hides behind each one. Ray makes herself useful, flitting in and out of view to check their surroundings. So far, nothing. We should find out how to get to the exits quickly, he says, and mentally pats himself on the back when his voice barely shakes. All Might probably knows this place better than we do. Fat fucking chance, Bakugo growls. Angry red eyes settle on Izuku for a split second too long before he turns away again. I'm not planning on running like a little bitch. Didn't you hear me, Deku? I'm finishing this the right way. Behind Bakugo's back, Izuku signals Ray. Find the nearest exit, he tells her. See if All Might is blocking the way. She hisses at him and shakes her head, pointing to Bakugo. Go, he mounts. She bares her teeth, and they bristle like anglerfish fangs. After nearly a full minute of silent argument, Ray finally relents and vanishes in a huff. Izuku is left alone with Bakugo, still with no idea where All Might is. He keeps an eye out for Ms. Nana. So, what is the plan? Izuku forces the words out past the fear gathering thick and heavy in the back of his throat. They don't have much time. At this point they have less than 30 minutes to do this. Less than a half hour to get past All Might. Gran Torino once told him that his reverence of All Might was only holding him back, shackling him from reaching his potential. That may very well be true, but it doesn't budge the fact that they haven't a chance in hell of beating the symbol of peace in a straight fight. His weakness doesn't matter because 30 minutes is well within his time limit, and Izuku can only manage a fraction of one for all without basically self-destructing. My plan, Bakugo snaps, is for you to stop fucking following me so you're not in the way when I knock him out. Knock out? All Might. Izuku has to job to keep up with him as they make their way through the city replica. Where is All Might? Ms. Nana had said she'd warn him, but it'd be nice to know where he is right now. I'll lead him around by the nose till the 30 minutes are almost up, Bakugo snarls. Catch him off guard when he's tired. Okay. Disbelief momentarily muffles his nervousness around Bakugo. Cool. Good start. Can we at least, workshop it? Until it's a little less terrible. Get lost already, shithead. Bakugo bridles at him, and Izuku recoils on instinct. If you're gonna make shitty comments while I do the real fighting, then fucking do it somewhere else. You're smarter than this. Izuku shoots back. You know how strong he is. What makes you think less than 30 minutes of chasing you around is going to make him tired? There was a small chance that it might, but Bakugo didn't know about the time limit or All Might's weakened state. Deku, I swear to fuck if you don't stop fucking following me. Desperation overcomes him. Why, you said so yourself, remember? When we were kids, you said All Might never. Bakugo whips around, and his sudden grip on Izuku's shoulder is hot and sparking with tiny explosions, too small to do more than scorch Izuku's costume. With no warning and no time to mentally prepare himself, he blanks out immediately, and his tongue goes limp and mute in his mouth. Don't fucking whine at me about when we were kids, you worthless mealy-mouthed piece of shit, Bakugo grits out through clenched teeth. Izuku opens his mouth to reply, but words refuse to string themselves together in his head. His mind fills with fog and cotton, protecting itself from the sharp edges of terror. Let go, please, let go, please, don't. Bakugo releases him and turns away, eyes burning with contempt. Yeah. That's what I thought. You act like you're better than me, but all you are is a little red afraid of his own goddamn shadow. It's equal parts anger, frustration, and years-old resentment, thrown together and shaken into something every bit as caustic and volatile as Bakugo's quirk. Something dark and ugly wells up inside of him, choking off fear and shame. Well, whose fault is that? He spits back. You saying it's my fault? You're pathetic. Bakugo doesn't even turn his head. Get the fuck off my case and stay out of the way, Deku. Maybe then you can be useful for once. The last fiber of his framed tapper snaps, and he skims off the very top of a deep, deep well of long-repressed feelings. You think I like being here? Izuku bursts out, equally angry as he is desperate because time is running out and All Might will make himself known soon, and they're running out of time to come up with a plan that actually has a chance of working. You think I wanted to work with you? I don't. I didn't. I don't trust you, I don't like you, and I don't have any reason to because I know you hate me, and I don't even know why. His fists are so tight that his knuckles creak, and the crooked ones on his right hand ache. But right now, we are up against All Might, and if you stopped and thought for 1 second you'd know we can't just go after him head on. There's no answer, but he can see the hard line of tension in Bakugo's shoulders, the way his fists clench at his sides as he trembles. It should have been a warning, but there's Ms. Nana in the distance, waving to him, time's up. He wants to cry, but he also really doesn't want to cry, so he yells instead. For once in your life, would you just listen to me, Kaken? He's half blind with fear and frustration, his eyes sting with tears that want to be shed, and because of that, he doesn't see Bakugo move until it's already too late to get out of the way. Weighted by one of the gauntlets on his costume, Bakugo's arm swings around like the head of a flail. The ground is flat asphalt. That's all Izuku knows for a moment because that's all he can feel. He can't see because of the bright starbursts of color bursting in his vision. But he can taste, and he tastes the blood trickling into his mouth. Pain shoots through his face and ricochets like a bullet through the inside of his skull, throbbing in time with his heartbeat. Learn to shut your fucking mouth, Deku. Bakugo's voice sounds strange through the ringing in his ears. The spots in his vision clear away, but tears replace them and turn his view of Bakugo into a wet, wavering blur. Just sit there and cry for all I care. I don't need your shitty help. He hears the scrape of Bakugo's boots on the pavement, and then... Heads up, kid. Izuku blinks the tears from his eyes and only has time to recoil and brace himself before a horizontal tornado of wind pressure rips through the testing facility. It misses them by a handful of paces, and even at that distance Izuku feels flattened by the blast. His limbs feel heavy, as if he's wading through deep water, but he gropes and crawls his way for the nearest cover. Without a backward glance, Bakugo swears fluently and charges straight in the direction of the source, leaving Izuku still crouching on the cracked pavement, half hidden by a damaged building. The previous stillness is now fragmented, first shattered by All Might's opening attack, and now split further by the roar of Bakugo's explosions. Hey, kiddo. Come on, little Bane, you gotta get up. Holy hell, did you get caught up in that? Toshi wasn't even aiming for you kids, he just wanted to spook you. Ms. Nana's voice trails off, and a cool hand closes on his shoulder. He flinches. Let go. Midoriya. You okay, Sprout? You're looking a little lost there. You're not concussed, are you? Oh, hey Ray, give me a hand here. Ray's familiar not voice rattles and statics by his ear. He gets to his feet, stumbling a little, and the ringing in his ears finally subsides. Better put together a plan in that head of yours, Ms. Nana advises. Your partners are, well. He's getting his ass kicked pretty hard. Good. The thought is immediate and viciously satisfying for the split second before remorse crushes it. He peers out and Bakugo's in trouble. He's charging in again and again, fists flashing with explosive power, but All Might tosses him around effortlessly, just as Izuku knew he would. He could have told him, did tell him. All Might's pulling punches, Izuku knows he is, because if he weren't then Bakugo would probably be dead, suppressor rings or no, but it's not by much. He needs help. The little voice that reminds him of that is so quiet now, so small, lost in the twisting pitch-black sea inside of him. He needs help. He's in trouble and alone and hurt, and maybe he's scared, too. The little voice calls, and from within that sea comes an answer. So was I. Izuku. Ms. Nana's voice cuts through the soupy fog in his head. Clock's ticking, Sprout. If you have some kind of game plan here, then you'd better act fast. The blood stiffens as it dries, cresting over his upper lip, his mouth, his chin. He licks at it, and some of it crumbles off on his tongue. I know, he says. Don't worry. I'll be fast. Bakugo is relentless, or at least as relentless as a boy his size can be against Toshinori. 6 years ago, these blows would have barely tickled, but now a few of them hit a touch too close to the wound all for one gave him, and only decades of training his self-control keep him from showing that pain on his face. With a swift twist, he tosses Bakugo to the ground and casts about for his other student. Young Midoriya is nowhere to be seen, but that doesn't mean anything. He's nearby, Toshinori can sense that much. But his successor is a crafty one, and possesses a healthy respect for All Might that verges on reverence. He won't attack head-on the way Bakugo does. Or perhaps he will, after all, that's what Toshinori least expects. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't almost eager to see what the boy comes up with. He likes the way Midoriya surprises him. What will you do, my boy? He thinks. How will you think your way through this one? Bakugo mistakes his pensiveness for distraction and propels himself into another nitro-fuel charge that carries him straight into Toshinori's wedding fest. When Toshinori hits him, Bakugo vomits. It certainly brings back memories, seeing that. Once upon a time, he'd lost count of how many times Gran Torino made him spew. As a boy he'd made a vow that if he ever took on a student, he'd never work them hard enough to make them puke. How times have changed. He doesn't want to, and he immediately wishes he hadn't, but Bakugo doesn't seem to respond to anything but loud and violent wake-up calls. You're frustrated, he says, standing back to let Bakugo finish retching. There's some distance between them. That punch drove Bakugo back by several meters. And I understand why. You've noticed young Midoriya's growth, haven't you? Aizawa told him about the revelation that Midoriya has been training in private with Todoroki and happened to mention Bakugo's furious reaction to it. The boy's newfound control of his quirk probably hasn't helped. You must know he started from a much lower level than you. You can't compare your pace that way, and it's pointless to be frustrated by someone else's efforts. Bakugo staggers back to his feet as Toshinori closes the distance between them. He looks weary. Already he's used almost as much power against Toshinori as he did over the course of the entire sports festival. He, too, has a healthy respect for the symbol of peace, for all that he shows it in a different way. He doesn't answer. It's such a waste. Toshinori tells him, willing him to listen, to understand. Instead of feeling threatened by his improvement, why not focus on your own? You have so much growing to do, boy. And not just with strength. He's tempted to nudge him towards teamwork. This may be an exam, but if that's what it takes for a breakthrough, then Toshinori can't regret telling him the answer. This time, instead of replying, Bakugo attacks him again. As he fends off the furious boy, Toshinori casts about once more, searching for his missing student. For all his brashness, young Midoriya has shown a hint or two of promise in the area of stealth. He'll exercise more caution than young Bakugo, but they only have so much time to regroup and retaliate with a proper plan if they manage it. The boy will make his move soon, or risk having his only ally be out of commission and face the strongest hero alone. "Where is your partner, young Bakugo?" he asks as he swats aside an explosive punch. "Do you even know? Did you pause even for a moment to consider what he can offer you?" "Fuck that," Bakugo chokes out. "Like I told that lying little shitheel. I don't want another worthless victory." He spits bile and brings his hand around for another blast, but Toshinori turns it aside with ease. "If it means having to borrow his shitty power, then I'd rather lose." As if in answer, the ringing of a distant bell echoes across the facility. Toshinori's head comes up, startled. Was that the signal for the end of the exams? Surely the half hour isn't over already. The boys should have had more time than that to overcome him. Beside him, Bakugo lets out an unearthly shriek. Toshinori blocks another blast and another until Bakugo's furious barrage drives him back a step. Red eyes wild with rage, the boy throws himself at Toshinori in a reckless, desperate series of attacks. "No," he roars. "Young Bakugo. God damn it, no. My boy. I told him." Bakugo screams as tears of rage gather in his eyes and his attack slow, not from giving up but from pure exhaustion. "I fucking told that slimy little shit. I'll kill him. It's for his own good." Toshinori suspects he might have cracked a few ribs with that punch, and if the boy keeps carrying on like this, then he'll only do himself serious injury. And so, as gently as he can manage, Toshinori seizes him in a sleeper hold. He's out in a matter of seconds, and Toshinori maneuvers him gently under one arm and checks the time. There are almost 20 minutes left on the clock. Toshinori gapes at the frozen timer, speechless. He's not sure if he would have been more or less dismayed if the timer really had run out. Because the fact that it hasn't can only mean one thing. When he reaches the exit, the boy is waiting for him, leaning with his back against the side of the gate. He straightens when Toshinori reaches him, still with Bakugo's unconscious form cradled in one arm. "Midoriya," he says sternly, but gets no further. It's not that the boy interrupts him. He doesn't need to. The first thing Toshinori sees is his student's face, and his nose must be broken for it to look like that. Dried blood covers most of it, smeared and dripping from his nose and mouth down to his chin and throat. What little skin is still visible in those areas is red with fresh bruising. And above it all, sunken green eyes stare up at him, sharp with mingled pain, fear, and defiance. And this all begs the question, how did young Midoriya come to look like this, when All Might hasn't seen hide nor hair of him since before the exam started, and knows for a fact that his first smash attack was a warning shot intended to miss? The answer, of course, ought to be obvious. "My boy," All Might sighs. "It seems you've missed the point of this test. You're disappointed in me." The boy's voice is cold. Flat. Far too calm for the look in his eyes. All Might doesn't answer, but he expects that the look on his face is answer enough. "Good." He blinks at his student, shocked. "Good? Means it worked, didn't it?" the boy replies, and beneath a smokescreen of nonchalance, his voice very nearly shakes. "I can't beat you. Not without help, and Bakugo wouldn't help. So I knew I'd have to trick you instead." His throat pods as he swallows. "Or at least I'd have to surprise you. I'd have to do something you wouldn't expect." He's shaking now, staring into Toshinori's eyes like he's afraid of what will happen if he looks away. "And you'd never expect me to do anything to disappoint you, right? Something is terribly wrong." The realization hits him abruptly, but not out of nowhere. It's unexpected, but to Toshinori's mind it eerily makes sense, as if it's simply the culmination of something that's been building just outside of his line of vision, something he'd only half noticed before being forced to face it head-on. He doesn't know exactly what it is, and he wonders if he might have if he'd paid better attention. The only thing he does know for sure is that a visit to Recovery Girl is in order. The trip is a quiet one. The shaky defiance leaves Midoriya with an abruptness that worries him, and pure exhaustion keeps Bakugo from rousing along the way. It's the exact opposite of the harrowing exercise on the second day of school. Midoriya is on his feet but tight-lipped and silent, and Bakugo is battered, exhausted, and dead to the world. He's done something wrong. The feeling sticks with him, as if multiple pairs of disapproving eyes are fixed on the back of his head, but when he turns around, no one is there. He's done something wrong, or at the very least he hasn't done something that would have been right. It doesn't go away when they finally do get to Recovery Girl's medical tent, because now there's a pair of disapproving eyes that he can actually see. I'll see to them, she says briskly, getting Bakugo situated on one of the empty cots. Has anyone else come in, he asks. Midoriya hasn't looked him in the eye since meeting him at the gate. Not yet, she replies. You were the first to finish, though Todoroki and Yaoyorozu also completed the exam while you were on your way. A pause and a glance to Midoriya. They passed. No serious injuries, but they'll also be seeing me just to be safe. Should be here shortly. His time runs out abruptly, his body deflates, and heavy exhaustion settles around him like a weighted blanket. Even his costume feels heavy. Tugging quietly, Recovery Girl chivies him out of the room. No arguments, now, she orders, when he's about to open his mouth to do exactly that. Be off with you, before the other boy wakes up. It shouldn't be so easy for such a tiny old lady to buffalo him no matter what form he happens to be using, but in spite of serious misgivings, he allows himself to be shown out. At the door, her voice drops nearly to a whisper. It was bad judgment, she says. What? Forcing those two together for something so important. The old woman scowls. It'll all come out once you review the footage, but if you happen to run into Aizawa, tell him I said that, would you? She's gone before he can form a reply. Well, now that is squared away, let's have a look at you. Recovery Girl's voice is brusquely kind as usual when she comes back from tending to Bakugo, and Izuku is impossibly grateful for it. She sits him down on a cot, all brisk business, and shines a light in his eyes. Her mouth is pinched with displeasure, but for once, Izuku knows that it isn't directed at him. Of course, knowing is different from internalizing, and therefore it doesn't stop his gut from twisting and shriveling up inside him. Rei isn't around to reassure him, she's standing guard over Bakugo like she doesn't trust him to stay where he is despite being unconscious. Well, you aren't concussed. The flashlight clicks off, and she puts it away and fetches a clean towel. She wets it with warm water and carefully cleans away the dried blood on his face. Sorry for making you wait, she continues. I had to see to his injuries first because they were a bit more serious, and for no other reason than that, understand. She frowns at him, and he reminds himself that that's not a disapproving frown, it's a you had better believe me frown. He nods. Any dizziness, she asks. He shakes his head. Nausea. Problems with vision. More head shaking. How about breathing? Can you breathe all right? He pauses, then reluctantly shakes his head. He's been breathing through his mouth since Bakugo punched him. HMPH. I was afraid of that. Just a moment. She stretches up and presses a quick kiss to his temple. Almost immediately the pain in his face eases, though it doesn't vanish entirely, and she gives him a box of tissues and instructs him to blow. It's painful and absolutely disgusting, seeing snot and congealed blood come out, but the results are swift. His face still aches, but he can breathe again. Better. He nods. Good. I fixed the bones and cartilage in your nose and sped up the healing process a few days on that bruising. It'll still ache a bit, and it shan't be pretty, but it'll clear up before the week is out. And you'll get out of it without a nose like Todoroki's. Something pings, and she takes out a phone and checks it. Ah, speaking of whom, just a moment. She walks back to the entrance to the medical tent and returns with Yaoyorozu and Todoroki in tow, both of whom stare a little wide-eyed upon seeing him. They both look battered and worn out, though not as bad as Izuku or Bakugo, for that matter. We are all right, for the most part, Yaoyorozu tells her. Aizawa-sensei sent us straight to you anyway, because he didn't want to give you a reason to yell at him. Oh, he already has, Recovery Girl says darkly, and Izuku twitches at the steel in her time. Oh, Yaoyorozu says, a little awkwardly. Well then. Hello, Midoriya, congratulations on being the first to complete the exam. Izuku can only nod and try not to flinch. That was fast, Todoroki remarks. How'd it go? Izuku opens his mouth to reply, and after a moment he closes it. The words won't come, and he knows better than to try and force them. At best he'll only look foolish, at worst he might alarm them enough to raise questions. He would rather avoid both, so he shuts his mouth and shrugs instead. His hands fidget in his lap, itching to sign a reply, but no one in this room knows sign, so he sits on his hands to still them. Hopefully the muteness will go away before anyone gets worried. It doesn't take Recovery Girl long to look them over and see to their injuries, which only leaves them both even more exhausted than before. It's going to be bed rest on school grounds for the lot of them once she's done her work. What's wrong with Bakugo? It's Todoroki who asks that question, and if Izuku weren't struck mute before, then he definitely is now. Luckily, Recovery Girl answers. All Might brought him in unconscious, and the healing I did took a lot out of him. He won't wake up for quite a while, I expect. Wow, Yaoyorozu looks to Izuku through drooping eyelids. You'll have to tell us how yours went later, Midoriya. I mean, Aizawa-sensei was tricky enough, but fighting All Might, her voice trails off a little before she continues. That bruise looks pretty bad, she says gently. And if Bakugo's out of commission, it must have gotten pretty intense. Izuku's fingers curl into the edge of the cot, and the thickness in his throat turns painful. Would have thought it'd be the other way around, Todoroki remarks, and his words are light and casual, but they land like a gut punch. Usually it's you who comes out with the worst, Midoriya. Wait, no, I didn't. Izuku doesn't have the energy to try to stop it, or even to want to stop it. Hot tears spill unchecked down his blank, empty face, and Izuku wants to die. Being a ghost can't possibly be as bad as this, as sitting like a waste of space while all his shame and frustration boils over. It's not the first time he's cried in front of Todoroki, but it's the first time he's ever seen his friend look at him with this much alarm and confusion and instant regret, like it's his fault. Izuku is crying when it isn't, it really isn't. It's no one's fault but his. That's he's a coward and a cheat, and really the furthest thing from a hero. He should have learned the lesson that Aizawa-sensei and All Might were trying to teach him, but all he did was lose his temper and lash out again, and it doesn't matter why he did it, because what he did was abandon someone, see someone hurt and in trouble and needing help, and turn and walk the other way. He needed help, but nobody came. All because Bakugo had hit him and Izuku had wanted to hit back, and that was the best way he knew how to hurt him, to spite him with another worthless victory. As his body shudders with unvoiced sobs, a hand lands awkwardly on his shoulder, too light and hesitant to be anyone but Todoroki, who isn't fluent in physical reassurance. Izuku wishes he could feel like he deserved it. Chapter 28. When Toshinori walks into the faculty office with a heavy heart, he finds it mostly empty but for Aizawa slouching at his desk. The only teachers who would still be there are those in the heroics department, helping with evaluations of the practical exams. His is still burned, raw from the tongue lashing he got from Recovery Girl, for all that she gave it to him over an hour ago. He feels sick too, well, the empty place where his stomach used to be, at least, and Aizawa looks nearly as bad as he feels. When he comes around to the younger hero's side, he sees why. The paused video footage on screen is of one of the practical exams. The one he proctored himself, to be exact. Toshinori has already seen it. He's promised himself he'll sit down and watch it again once the acidic burn in his gut fades, but now might as well be the time. It seems Aizawa is stronger than him in this respect. At the moment, Aizawa's face is mostly hidden by the hair falling over his face, and what little Toshinori can see of his eyes isn't pretty. Aizawa, he says cautiously. They have never been friends, but this, at least, warrants discussing. Aizawa shifts in his seat, pushes one side of his hair behind his ear, and glares at the frozen screen. For a moment Toshinori thinks he's ignoring him, and then... fucked up. It's a mumble on par with young Midoriya's usual sotto voce muttering. Pardon? Aizawa sits up marginally straighter. I fucked up, he repeats, louder this time. It's almost a relief to hear that, not because he enjoys hearing Aizawa take blame, but because his junior is open to discussion at all. Ah, Toshinori replies and feels confident enough to nudge the nearest chair closer and sit down. I might as well take responsibility also. No, Aizawa laces his fingers together and glowers over the platform of his hands. My decision, my bad judgment. He lets out a long sigh through his nose. You know what annoys me? I could have avoided this with one change. Just one. No other rearranging necessary. How do you mean? The furrow in Aizawa's brow deepens. Midoriya and Todoroki. Toshinori blinks in surprise. Really? HM. They get along fairly well, so they'd make a good team, but in that case, wouldn't that be too easy for them? Moreover, he can't imagine what would happen in a team-up between Yaoyorozu and Bakugo. The poor girl has been so unsure of herself lately, having to work with someone as forceful and stubborn as Bakugo would only discourage her further, wouldn't it? No, that's not. Aizawa shakes his head. I mean switching them. Toshinori opens his mouth to reply, then stops. And thinks. Ha, he says. Midoriya already has decent analytical and tactical skills, Aizawa says. Considering how destructive his quirk is, that's to be encouraged, and collaborating with Yara Rosa would both strengthen that and put her in a favorable position to assert herself. He takes a deep breath. Todoroki and Bakugo both rely on brute force at the expense of collaboration, pairing them against an overwhelmingly powerful opponent like he would have forced them to rethink their usual strategies. He falls quiet, and Toshinori nods. It makes sense. Even an inexperienced teacher like him can recognize that Yaoyorozu has been struggling with self-confidence lately. Up to 30 minutes of working with young Midoriya could have cured that easily enough. Why not choose that in the first place, then? Aizawa's eyebrows knit together, and he makes a disgusted noise in the back of his throat. So the animosity between Midoriya and Bakugo. Misjudged the problem. Stupid. He may not get along with Aizawa, but hearing the younger hero so disgusted with himself throws Toshinori for a loop. Aizawa, I also... No, shut up. I know what you're going to say, so save it. Undaunted, Toshinori pushes on. Did he tell you that something was wrong? He shouldn't have had to, Aizawa gritted out. I should have noticed without it being pointed out to me by my own students. He told me. Toshinori forced a speech past the lump in his throat. Or at least he tried. At this, Aizawa sits up a little straighter. He talked to you about this. When? On the way to the exam, Toshinori admits. He was nervous. Signing to himself again, though I couldn't tell what. I don't remember what I said, but he looked me in the eye and told me it was the nightmare scenario. I thought he was being purposely melodramatic, but his successor's tired, desperate eyes flash in his memory again, and he swallows his guilt. I underestimated things. Aizawa's frown deepens. And after. It's not nice to think about. It still twists at him to remember it. He said it was he didn't know how to beat me, so the only way to win was to do something unexpected. His voice turns bitter with shame. And I would never expect him to risk disappointing me, would I? Aizawa's cheekbone shifts as he clenches his teeth. Anything else? Nothing. I left him with Recovery Girl. He hesitates, eyes his colleague, and wonders if there's a tactful way to ask his next question. I take it you've spoken with her. The grimace on Aizawa's face tells him all he needs to know. Asked her the same question once she was done yelling at me. And... nothing. Didn't talk to her or anyone else. Stayed silent until he left. Toshinori's heart sinks further. Oh. The door swings open and present MIC comes strolling in, missing his jacket and absently scratching at his arms. Shouder, quick, I need your help. One of Aizawa's bloodshot eyes twitch. What? Present MIC stumbles a little to join them, either unaware of or purposely ignoring Aizawa's dark mood. Your students, he almost whines, buried me in bugs. Bugs, Shouder. Creepy crawly deaf dealers. I can't stop feeling tiny little legs all over me. He shudders deeply. I think I got all of them, but can you help me check? Yamada, Toshinori sighs. Now really isn't the time. Oh. You guys busy? Yamada sobers almost instantly, though he still twitches a little. He catches sight of the screen. Oh hey, test footage. Figuring out feedback, or what? Thankfully, he seems to read the silence that follows and his face falls. Oh. So I'm a little afraid to ask, but what happened with Midoriya this time? Toshinori looks at him sharply. How do you know it has to do with Midoriya? Couple reasons. I saw him before he left campus and he looked pretty rough. He usually stutters a little whenever he has the chance to say goodbye to me, which is both flattering and adorable, but he didn't say 2 words to me today. Toshinori shifts uncomfortably. Mostly the look on your face, though. No offense, All Might, but you worry about him more than the rest of the class put together. Not that I blame you at all, considering what he gets up to if you don't keep an eye on him, but you're worse than a single mother with that kid. He pulls up a chair to get a comfortable view of Aizao's monitor screen. So what's up? Instead of answering, Aizao starts up the footage. There's no audio, but there doesn't need to be. The video footage shows the pair at the beginning of the exam, Bakugo storming through the testing ground and pointedly ignoring Midoriya as he rushes to keep up. It's plain that Midoriya is trying to communicate, but Bakugo isn't listening. The conversation, such that it is, gets more heated as Midoriya gets desperate and frustrated while Bakugo continues to brush him off. Midoriya's hands twist at his sides in familiar ways. Hold on, is he signing? Yamada leans forward for a better look. You recognize it? Toshinori asks. All Might, you're talking to the guy who spent his entire childhood trying not to knock down his house with a shouty quirk he couldn't always control. Yeah, I know sign. He squints. Kinda garbled, though. And it's a bad angle. Something about finding the exit fast, probably putting together his own plan, since it doesn't look like his partner is interested in working with him. Oh man, is this him doing the mumble thing, but in sign? That's adorable. And then, of course, the inevitable scene arrives. Whatever Midoriya says to him, Bakugo doesn't want to hear it. Yamada cringes when Bakugo's swing makes contact. Oh. Okay, I see why you two are in a mood. Aizawa stops the video. That's not the part that concerns me the most, it's this. He plays back the previous minute before Bakugo lashes out. At one point, Bakugo turns to face him and grabs his arm and Midoriya. Midoriya freezes. He stops moving, stops talking, doesn't even try to resist or get away. He stops, and even after Bakugo lets go, it takes him a moment to move again. Not a good sign, Yamada remarks. Has that ever happened before? Not that I've seen. They haven't been paired up for training since day 2. Aizawa finally closes the video. They've avoided each other since then, and I assumed it was just a mutual grudge they needed to get over. His jaw tightens and he rises from his seat. I'll see you two tomorrow. Toshinori lets him go without a word and soon takes his leave as well. He has quite a bit to think about. I'm leaving for school, Mon. When she hears this, she takes him in her arms and holds him long enough to risk making him late. Izuku lets her without complaint, knowing he probably scared her. Until now, he hasn't spoken to her with his mouth instead of his hands since yesterday. Whenever he goes quiet, it reminds her of things they would both rather forget. She finally lets him go, and he and Rei leave the house at a run to make up for lost time. Hey, Deku. He catches up to Uraraka before he reaches Yue's front gate. Usually it's the other way round. You're a little later than usual, Aunt. Oh, that doesn't look good. Her good morning cheer gives way to instant concern. Privately, Izuku wonders if he could have gotten away with wearing a face mask today. Recovery Girl fixed his nose as good as new and jump-started the healing for his bruised face, but that only means that the marks look days old instead of fresh. Even Marino commented on his appearance in the bathroom mirror. From nose to chin, his face is a dark, blotchy purple grain. Does he have time to run to the nurse? Bet one more healing off of her. That's to be expected, considering your opponent, and Izuku jumps, because Ida's suddenly right there, which means Tensei is also right there, and a little warning would have been nice. All Might certainly didn't go easy on you, did he? Izuku stares at him, nonplussed. Ida thinks All Might did this to him. Ida thinks Izuku spent any time whatsoever actually fighting All Might. I don't think any of the teachers did, Uraraka says. Aoyama and I almost didn't pass at all. She winces. Actually, we technically went over the time limit, but since we still got the handcuffs on 13, we passed anyway. It was a close fight in my case as well, but Ojiro and I managed to pull through quite successfully, Ida replies. Still, I was pleasantly surprised when they announced your victory, Midoriya. Congratulations on being the first. Yeah. Uraraka bounces on her toes. You've got to tell us how you pulled that off, fastest when in class, up against the number 1. And you were working with Bakugo. We'll have plenty of time to trade stories later, Ida says, and Izuku sighs with relief as his stomach churns. We are already a bit late. Oh, good morning, Todoroki. Morning. Izuku focuses on the ground at his feet. He can feel eyes on him, Todoroki's eyes, studying him, probably remembering the last time they saw each other. "Are you all right?" Todoroki asks. For a moment his tongue and throat lock up, and Izuku fears that his goodbye to his mother was a fluke, that the muteness will stretch to weeks and months again. But he swallows in spite of his dry mouth, and tries again. "Fine," he mumbles. "Just slept a lot, because of the healing." "Ah," Todoroki replies, and Izuku hurries into the building before he can attract any more questions. Final exams are the talk of the classroom, naturally. Izuku keeps his head down and weaves through his classmates, desperate to avoid notice. Kaminari, looking emotionally worse for wear, approaches him with what might be congratulations, but Rei bares her teeth and hisses, exuding fear in a noxious cloud, and it's enough to make his classmate change his mind. Gradually, over the minutes before the start of class, he hears the results of the rest of the exams. It's not that he's trying to listen, but the talk is all around him, so it's impossible not to absorb it. Todoroki and Yaoyorozu escape Daizao together. Past. Tsuyu and Tokoyami defeated and handcuffed ectoplasm. Past. Jiru and Kuda escaped present MIC together. Past. Maneda and Sira escaped midnight together. Past. Uraraka and Anyama defeated and handcuffed 13. Past. Shuji and Hakakia defeated and handcuffed Snipe. Past. Ida and Ojira escaped power loaded together. Past. Ashida, Kaminari, Kirishima, and Satu were the only ones who failed the practical exam. A heavy pit had settled on Izuku's chest at some point after he left Recovery Girl, and now it weighs even further on his heart. He puts his head down on his desk, cushions his chin on one arm, and prays that no one will approach him. The results speak for themselves. Everyone else pulled together, not him. Everyone else stayed with their partners and faced daunting odds as a pair, as a team, not him. Everyone else was clever or daring or determined or some combination of all three, not him. Everyone else struggled and sweated and fought for their victory, not him, not him, not him. In every other team, they either triumphed together or they didn't triumph at all. It isn't possible for him to sink any lower in his chair, but he tries. Rei's aura bleeds fear and unease as she crouches over him, and his classmates avoid his desk without quite realizing why. And Izuku is so wrapped up in his nerves and shame and heavy, aching guilt that he forgets. He forgets where he is, and he forgets one inevitable fact. Bakugo, Heya. Kirishima's voice carries through the entire classroom, and Izuku's pulse stops dead in his chest. "Man, congrats on finishing the exam so fast. How'd you and Midoriya pull that off?" Izuku knows what's coming, deep in his most basic instincts, thanks to years of habits and patterns drilled into his head. It's enough of a warning to shove himself up off his desk and back, as far back as he can go before his shoulders slam into the seat behind him. He's not sure what causes the ringing in his ears, whether it's Bakugo's hand slamming onto the surface of his desk or the accompanying explosion that blackens the wood, and isn't this distantly familiar, an old panic trigger that he hasn't seen since middle school, a lifetime ago. "Deku, you slimy little shit." And just like that, the past months haven't happened. There's no Yue, no One for All, no All Might or Aizawa-sensei or Nana, and Midoriya Izuku has no quirk and no friends except the ones whose hearts don't beat anymore, the ones who can cry out with rage but can't protect him. Bakugo is there again, inches away with fire and thunder at his fingertips, and Izuku can only shrink back and cower and freeze blank and empty, because at least when he's empty he doesn't feel like the Deku whose name means useless, weak, crazy. Look at him shake, watch me make the quirkless creep cry like a little girl. There are tears in Bakugo's eyes, anger and frustration making him weep with rage. "I told you not to get in my way. I told you I was gonna win it right, and you fucked it up again." Panic howls through his veins, and he waits for pain, for burning, for smoke and thunder, but instead there's a pitiful pop and then silence, and the coils of a scarf whip around Bakugo with an audible snap, and Izuku looks through darkening tunnel vision to find red eyes. Not Bakugo's eyes, Eraserhead's eyes, bloodshot, scarlet and cold and furious. The teacher yanks Bakugo back, slamming him down into his seat, and no teacher has ever done that before. Stopped Bakugo cold, stopped his anger and his quirk and even his voice, gagging him before more poison words can scald Izuku's ears. And just like that, the danger is past, and a room full of eyes stare and don't look away. If anyone speaks, then Izuku can't hear it past the cotton wool in his ears and the high-pitched whining tone echoing in his brain. He punts the brakes on his roaring panic because homeroom is only 10 minutes and he needs time. But it's just like Socha's car, that mangled steel corpse left to rest on the beach. The lines are cut and Izuku is going to crash. He breathes in, filling his lungs just enough to spit "Can I be excused" in a half-coherent strain, and waits for Aizawa-sensei's nod before he weaves through the desks and hurries to the door. He makes it to the hallway before the classroom becomes too small to let him breathe. Cold, willing hands tug at him, guide him, pull him along, blank white eyes surround him, soft with pity as their owners whisper reassurances that skim uselessly off the shell of terror around his heart. Tensei, he thinks it's Tensei, and maybe the other one's Narita, leads him somewhere, and he follows. The last time this happened, he was in the hospital, fleeing to a bathroom so that he could break without anyone witnessing it. He follows their lead as they herd him along, hoping they find somewhere fast, because he doesn't have much time before. Half-blind, he runs straight into someone, warm and solid, a living person who catches him by the shoulders before he can fall over. Young Midoriya. No, not him, anyone but him. Why didn't they warn me? He opens his mouth to speak, but all that comes out is a strangled noise. There are hands guiding him along again, All Might's hands, this time. The ghosts are still there, just beyond his reach. A door closes behind him, and when his legs finally quake out from under him, a sofa is there to catch him. Breathe, someone says close to his ear. Not All Might, Tensei. Narita. He can't keep track anymore. He counts in his head, tapping along with a finger on his knee. Too fast, seconds aren't that fast, but it helps. It helps. When the tunnel vision clears and he comes back into himself, there are hands on his. He's already gripping them and loosens his fingers with a whispered sorry. Are you all right? All Might asks him. Izuku nods until his teeth rattle, fighting against the pressure building in his throat. This is the first time he's spoken with All Might, the first time he's looked at him since after the exam, and his mentor found him like this. He looks to the ghosts, finds Tensei watching him, and stares back with pleading eyes. Sorry, Midoriya, Ida's brother says softly. But you need to not be alone right now. Don't blame him, kiddo, Ms. Nana murmurs from somewhere by All Might's shoulder. When I saw them leading you off, I asked them to bring you to him. You need to talk to him about what happened out there. His eyes burn, and he shuts his eyes before the tears can come. Not yet. His throat feels blocked again, filtering air through but leaving words locked tight inside of him. I'm sorry, he signs, and it's not like his indistinct, furtive signing with Ray. He shapes the phrase carefully with his hands. It's a simple one, a basic one, and one of the first he happened to show All Might. You have nothing to be sorry for. All Might's hand settles upon his shoulder, warm and reassuring. Did something happen in class? Yes. His hands shake, and he switches from signing to fingerspelling. It's slower, but it's easier for All Might to understand if he sounds it out than it is for Izuku to try to express himself with the limited sign he's shown him up to now. I couldn't do what you wanted, he says, slowly, one syllable at a time. Or I could, but I didn't try. I gave up so fast. I couldn't win the way I wanted. Tears trickle down his face, and he ducks his head so he can't look All Might in the eye. I'm sorry I disappointed you. All Might watches, reading each sound as he gradually ekes out the words. No, my boy. Izuku drops his hands into his lap, and All Might grips his shoulder until he raises his head again. I'm not disappointed in you. I'm not upset with you at all. His disbelief must show on his face. Without breaking eye contact, All Might gives a gentle shake of his head. I wasn't listening to you. You tried to tell me, in your own way, that you needed help, and I didn't listen. Izuku gapes at him, wide-eyed and disbelieving, because, no he didn't, did he? He made a stupid joke, but other than that he kept his mouth shut. All Might was strong, stronger than anyone else, but he wasn't a mind reader. Words are still hard, but at least his face is apparently an open book. One of the marks of a good hearer, All Might says quietly, is knowing when something is wrong without needing to be told. And I'm finding, now, that the same can be said of teachers, only it's a very different type of wrong that I have to look out for. He pauses, looks away for a moment, and continues. When I let the exam continue when you were clearly uncomfortable with it, that was wrong of me. As your teacher, you deserved better from me. Izuku can only stare at him, at a loss for words. It's just like All Might to let his symbol of peace habits color his teaching methods, chasing and worrying over every hint of someone else's distress. Izuku isn't ungrateful for it, but it still fills him with warm embarrassment. He's supposed to be the next symbol of peace, isn't he? This is a school for heroes, he shouldn't have to be coddled. He twitches and bites back a yelp when someone pinches him sharply on the arm. He looks down and Ray glares up at him. Stop that. Izuku resists the temptation to scowl. Trust Ray to be overprotective. Can I ask you a question? All Might says. It's kind of personal, but just yes or no is fine. Izuku looks at him again, swallowing his nervousness. All Might frowns. You told me once, quite a while ago, that you went through a shy phase, and that's what made you learn sign language. Izuku's throat seizes, and he shakily nods. Millimeter. That phase of anything to do with young Bakugo. His eyes are glued to the floor now. It would be easy, so easy, to shake his head and move on. But at this point, would there be any point in trying to hide it? Izuku offers one more jerky nod. He doesn't look up at All Might's face, but he hears the non-committal little hum. Are you all right to go back to class? All Might asks, and Izuku sighs with relief. If you'd like to stay longer. Izuku shakes his head and finally lifts his hands from his lap again. I'm fine. All Might looks skeptical, of course, but Izuku gets to his feet before his mentor can press the issue. If he hurries, he can catch the last few minutes of homeroom. Aizawa-sensei probably isn't happy about the exam either, much less the mess this morning with Bakugo, and Izuku would rather not give him any more reasons to frown on him. You okay? Tensei asks as the classroom ghosts follow him back. Izuku nods stiffly. There are only 3 or so minutes left before next period. On the bright side, that means he'll only have to endure Aizawa-sensei's disapproval for that long. Tensei and Narita vanish well before Izuku gets to the door. Tensei's eager to get back to his brother, and Narita gets bored easily when there isn't a crisis. Ray stays close, and Izuku braces himself before nudging the door open. Heads turn to look as he steps back in, which is jarring but inevitable. Izuku swallows uncomfortably as he steps in, looking instinctively to his own scorched desk, and in particular the one in front of it. He blinks. Uraraka blinks back, looking equally as bewildered as he feels, which makes sense because she's sitting in Bakugo's desk. Bakugo is nowhere to be seen. Izuku looks to Uraraka's old seat as he passes it on the way to his own, just out of curiosity, and finds Bakugo's bag shoved under the chair and a piece of paper fixed to the desk with a bit of tape. Tantrum-throwing baby jail, it reads. From the desk next to it, Satu grins and flashes him a thumbs up. Izuku hurries the rest of the way to his seat. Homeroom ends not long after Midoriya returns. Aizawa considers it a minor miracle that the entire class didn't descend upon him as one the second he opened the door. You're all dismissed. Please save pressing conversations for when you're outside of my classroom. Midoriya skirts around the outside of the desks, slowly so that he stays behind the bulk of the crowd. His path takes him closer to Aizawa's desk than it would have had he taken a straighter route, and his pace quickens as he tries to hurry to the door. Not you, Aizawa says, and for a split second Midoriya looks like someone facing the gallows. Uraraka, who was sticking close to him up to that point, gives him a sympathetic look. Want us to wait? Midoriya shakes his head and gives her a grin, and she reluctantly follows the rest of the class out. The room empties, leaving Midoriya standing awkwardly in front of Aizawa's desk. Sit down, Aizawa sighs, because the boy looks ready to tip over. I'm sorry, Midoriya blurts out instead of sitting. I know you were trying to teach me something with the exam, but I just gave up instead of actually trying to learn anything, and I know I messed up and I could have done so much better but I didn't and it's fine if you fail me or I have to retake it. It's fine. I understand. Well, Aizawa thinks wryly. At least he's talking again. Out loud, he says, at least lean on the desk behind you if you're not gonna sit down. You look like you're about to fall over. Hesitantly, Midoriya obeys. He grips the edge of the desk and stares at the floor, and Aizawa huffs out a sigh. My intentions with the exam were to address the animosity between you and Bakugo, while also hammering out some of the other bad habits you both have been showing. The sports festival showed me that you both are decent strategists capable of collaborating in teams, just not with each other. He pauses. My assumption at the time was that this was a problem you both had to work to fix. On top of that, I had hoped that being forced to work for victory with someone he holds in contempt might teach Bakugo a little humility. Midoriya winces. Aizawa takes another deep breath. And for that, I owe you an apology. Deathly silence falls in the empty classroom. Slowly, Midoriya raises his head and stares at Aizawa as if he spoke that last part in Welsh. Midoriya, you are a student, Aizawa continues, before the boy has the chance to launch into another apologetic tirade. Your responsibilities at this school are to learn, grow, do your homework, and try not to screw up. And that's on you. Your learning, your growth, your homework, and your screw-ups. No one else's. He hesitates again, gritting his teeth, because he hasn't had to eat crow in front of a student since back when he was a rookie teacher. I misjudged the history between you two. And by doing that, I made your growth a tool to further Bakugo's, which I shouldn't have done. But Midoriya breaks in. But it's not just heroes have to do that, don't they? Collaborate with other heroes even if they don't get along. I couldn't leave people in the lurch just because. Your classmates' poor behavior is not your responsibility. Midoriya startles when Aizawa interrupts him. And fixing it is my job. Trying to shovel some of that headache on you is unprofessional. Midoriya shrinks in on himself. But didn't I sort of just make it worse? And even if it's not my responsibility, what about the test? Aizawa raises an eyebrow at him. What about it? I mean, I didn't really. I believe the testing parameters were quite clear, Midoriya. But Aizawa is tempted to ban him from beginning sentences with that word. Only one of you was required to escape the testing ground in order to pass. You fulfilled that requirement. We have it on tape and everything. But I gave up. Midoriya looks desperately confused. I just left him, I abandoned my teammate, and in real life, why are you just letting it slide? Aizawa takes a while to answer, partly to give his student a chance to calm down, but mostly to take a good, long look at him. He started this awkward discussion expecting a sigh of relief at the end, a thank he stammered out before Aizawa could wave it off, maybe an embarrassed little burr. But here's Midoriya arguing with him, piling blame on his own shoulders and refusing to accept that he isn't the one that screwed up this time. Besides which, Midoriya, what happened when you passed through that gate? The question gets him a startled blink. The bell rang. Meaning what? The exam ended. And I passed. Meaning what? Aizawa presses. Midoriya frowns in confusion. All Might showed up. With Bakugo, he blinks and Aizawa sees realization dawn. The fight stopped. Aizawa nods. Regardless of the difference between a test and real life, you had a difficult situation before you and you dealt with it. The course of action you chose prevented further conflict between you and your teammate, ended the conflict with your opponent, and prevented further injury to your partner. He pauses to make sure it's sinking in. We were grading for judgment just as much as strength or skill. You're not invincible nor infallible, and you went for the most reasonable outcome, and that, Midoriya, is why I'm letting it slide. Because doing otherwise would be punishing you for Bakugo's poor decisions. Or worse, I would be punishing you for mine. Midoriya blinks twice more. Tears gleam in his eyes, threatening to overflow, and a moment later they aren't just threatening anymore. Aizawa reverts his gaze to give his student some cursory sense of privacy and waits until the sniffling dies down before he pushes forward one last time. How long has Bakugo been bullying you? His student startles again, wiping hastily at his eyes. It's not he. Whatever lie he was preparing quickly sputters out. The floor draws his eyes again. 5 years, I guess. Since the 4th grade, then. And no, I mean, Midoriya fidgets. 5 years, cumulatively. It started when we were 5, after our quirks came in. And then when I was 7 I switched schools and didn't see him again until middle school. Aizawa nods. He takes out a slip of paper, jots down a quick note and his signature, and slides it across to Midoriya. Here. Get going. Midoriya takes it. What's this? Aizawa raises an eyebrow again. It's a late note, he says. Show that to Samantha so he won't mark you down. Oh. Thanks. Midoriya looks like he's about to cry again, and really, it's just a late night. Aizawa gives a slow blink. Get to class, Midoriya. Yes, sensei. Midoriya nearly knocks over a desk in his scramble for the door, and Aizawa sits back and considers how to proceed. I want a do-over. Aizawa's forehead twinges, the warning sign of a stress headache. He opens his eyes to find the classroom emptied out, students gone for the day, all except one. Bakugo scowls at him over the desk, less angry than simply sullen, hunched over with his hands shoved in his pockets in a pose that looks simultaneously indifferent and defiant. What was that? Aizawa asks. He stirs subtly in his chair, going from relaxed to ready in a single shift of muscles. I said I want a do-over, Bakugo snaps. Let me retake the exam. The practical exams were graded pass or no pass, Bakugo, Aizawa says evenly. And you passed. There's nothing for you to make up. It was bullshit and you know it. Bakugo's hand hits the desktop with a dull thud. He doesn't slam or pound it, and his palms don't give off a single spark. The kid's being polite. I passed on a fucking technicality, so how about you actually test me without Deku fucking everything up? Aizawa clasps his hands loosely in front of him, lacing the fingers together into a small bridge. He considers the boy in front of him through narrow eyes. Is this how it usually goes, he asks. Bakugo blinks, squinting in confusion. What? You make demands, shout them loud enough, throw a tantrum until you get what you want. Is that how you deal with teachers? Aizawa pauses. Is that how you expect to deal with me? The note of danger in his voice is gentle compared to what villains get, and Aizawa carefully controls it as it trickles into his voice. The result is clear, Bakugo bridles, but for once he keeps a leash on his temper. Or at least what passes for a leash with him. I'm not throwing a tantrum, he barks. I just want. Speaking of what you want, Aizawa breaks in. Tell me something, Bakugo. He meets his students' eyes and holds them. Why do you want to become a hero? What? Bakugo bites down on what is clearly another budding tirade. The fuck? What does that have to do with anything? Humor me. Why do you want to become a hero? Bakugo scowls, clenches his hands into white-knuckled fists. Because I want to win. I want to be the strongest, the best. And I want everyone to know it. That doesn't answer the question, Aizawa says. What do you mean that doesn't? You want to win, you want to be the best, you want to be the strongest, but that doesn't tell me why you want to be a hero. Slowly Aizawa sits up straighter. Why not be a professional martial artist, then? Why not join the armed forces? Look into cage matches. Why not spend your days wandering the city, picking fights with everyone who looks at you funny? He lets the full force of his glare pour into Bakugo's eyes. Why not be a villain? Slan. Fuck you. Bakugo forgets his manners then. He's not stupid enough to use his quirk, but this time Aizawa feels the desk reverberate with the force of the blow. Where the fuck do you get off calling me a villain? Where do you get off calling yourself a potential hero? Aizawa asks. Anything I just listed off would give you the chance to prove your strength, to prove yourself stronger than those around you, the last one especially. So why do you want to be a hero? Bakugo stares at him, red eyes blazing, speechless with fury. What I hope, Aizawa continues, is that somewhere, deep down, there's some part of you, some deep, buried instinct, that points you to the side of the angels. That some part of you, no matter how small, wants to do good. I hope, for the sake of your position at this school, that I'm not wrong. This time, Aizawa sees a flinch. It's not much, but it's there, and the self-righteous fury in his students' eyes starts to crack, just a little. What's that supposed to mean? First of all, it doesn't mean I'm going to expel you, Aizawa says. You're an arrogant, headstrong, immature teenager, and at this point you need guidance more than you need a punishment that final. What it does mean, well, you're strong, and you're talented, and you have a powerful quirk. So tell me, Bakugo, when was the last time you used any of those gifts for someone else's benefit? Bakugo blinks. When was the last time you helped someone in need? Fought for something that wasn't your own ego? When was the last time you risked an injury for no other reason than to prevent someone else from doing the same? By this point, Bakugo is shaking with rage or something else. Aizawa can't be sure. All he can do is hope that some of this is sinking in. Does that matter to you at all? Aizawa asks. Has it occurred to you even once that the most important aspect of being a hero is to protect those weaker than yourself? He can hear Bakugo's knuckles popping from here, the boy's clenching his fists so tight. I don't know how your teachers have dealt with you in the past, Aizawa says flatly. And frankly, I don't care. For what it's worth, I don't think this is entirely your fault. You used to getting your way because no one has ever bothered to tell you no, and that's on them. But I learn from my mistakes and from the mistakes of those who came before me, so I'm telling you, right now, no. No, you may not retake the exam. You'll stick with the results you have and receive extra attention this summer to fix the plethora of problems I saw in your performance. He rises from his seat and Bakugo's shaking stills as he makes his way around the desk to stand in front of his student. You'll also be starting the next term with a 4-day suspension for assaulting a classmate and damaging school property. And I will be watching your progress to make sure you learn the right lessons and you unlearn your bad habits. He stoops a little until they are eye to eye. Let me be clear, Bakugo. Here at UA, we train heroes. I am not interested in teaching combat skills to a bully, or worse, giving one a license to use his quirk freely. I am not interested in teaching a student who doesn't seem to realizing that treating the people around him as stepping stones and garbage makes him utterly unworthy of standing alongside them. Bakugo tenses. It looks more like a flinch. I will do my best with you, Bakugo, but I need you to work with me. So shape up and learn from this, or there really is nothing I can do to help you. Learn what? Bakugo's voice is quieter, but still sharp and scraping and burning with shame and resentment. You can start with this exam, Aizawa says, straightening again. If you're worried that you couldn't learn anything, then here's a lesson you can take from it. People have limits, Bakugo. Even the kindest, most patient people have limits, and you managed to hit Midoriya's the other day, didn't you? This time Bakugo really does flinch. Heroes are human. They are fallible. And like every other human being on the planet, they can be pushed too far. So if you need a reason to fix your behavior, here's one. One day in the future, you'll find yourself in the same position you did the other day, only it won't be make-believe. You'll be up against enemies who are stronger than you, more prepared, more deadly. Aizawa locks eyes with him one last time. And how you treat your allies can be the difference between having help and being utterly alone. Bakugo tries to hold his gaze. It's a valiant effort, but after a few seconds his chin drops and he stares at the floor with watery eyes. Izuku's hands are in Ms. Marino's hair, helping her pin up a complicated updo when his phone buzzes and Marino's hair ends up hopelessly snarled. Ah, beans, Marino says. This isn't working. Go ahead and answer that, Midoriya, we can try this again later. She vanishes without another word. There isn't much to do with the term over. There's no homework, of course, and with a summer training camp in their future, there's little more he can do but pack, text his friends, and let the excitement build. He checks his messages and finds a new one from Kirishima. 418 Kirishima. Hey Midoriya. So me and some of the others are gonna get together and hang out this weekend before we leave for camp, and I was wondering if you wanted to come. His phone pings with another message. 420 Kirishima. Oh nah. Bakugo's not coming. It's really not his thing, and also some of the others told me what happened in study group. Surya wasn't there, that was super not cool of him, said Face. In spite of himself, Izuku can't help but smile. 422 Kirishima. But anyway, if you want to come with, that'd be pretty cool. There's this sweet shopping mall in Kiyasha Ward with some great stores. I'm thinking we can buy some awesome supplies to bring to camp, you know. So what do you say? Mika springs up onto the bathroom counter and Izuku obligingly scratches her ears as he sends his response. 422 me. Sounds like fun. Count me in. Chapter 29. And I don't know, that was it, for me. Izuku stares up at the sky, feeling the grass tickle at the back of his neck. The clouds move slowly above him, thin and wispy in the early summer. His back itches from the grass or the damp shirt pressed against his back, but he doesn't move. His mouth feels dry, even though he just took a drink. I am not, it wasn't just, he tries to continue, but he just can't find a good way to say it. I weighed my options. Or, I tried to, at least. And I thought of a couple ideas to win, or at least, the beginnings of ideas. But they all depended on getting Bakugo to work with me, and I just didn't know how to do that. Because I already tried, and I didn't want him to hit me again. He doesn't say that. It's too embarrassing to admit that aloud, especially in the company he's currently keeping. I couldn't figure it out, and I knew I only had so much time before All Might came looking for me. So I left. Bakugo went to try and fight All Might, and I went straight to the gate. There's no answer for a while. Izuku can imagine what Uraraka might say, or Ida. They would reassure him and sympathize. Whether or not they really approved, Uraraka would side with him for sure, and Ida might point out that they, of all people, ought to know the good sense in running from a hopeless fight. But Ida and Uraraka aren't here right now. His classmates decided to give study group another try after summer break, to give Ida time to organize their ground rules, if nothing else. So it's just him and Todoroki again, like it used to be, and how he'll take this is anyone's guess. Sympathy isn't Todoroki's strong suit. Izuku can see how much he struggles with putting that sort of thing on display, and that his experiences have left him with lopsided standards for what is and isn't acceptable. Besides that, he has over 10 years of punching bag treatment to Izuku's 5, and he still finds the strength to face endeavor every day. So maybe Izuku could have picked a better sympathetic ear among his school friends, but Todoroki is here and trustworthy, and Izuku could do a lot worse, too. Do you think less of me? He tries to keep his voice neutral, as if he's commenting on the shape of the clouds. No, Todoroki answers readily enough. It's so immediate and characteristically blunt that really slips out before Izuku can think of an actual response. He can hear Todoroki shifting in the grass and crossing his legs to keep his feet from falling asleep. Did you expect me to? And no. It comes out too hesitant for Izuku to simply brush it off. Maybe. I don't know. I guess I thought it'd take you longer to decide if the answer was no. He hesitates, swallowing in the hopes of dealing with his dry throat. So you don't think I should have stuck it out? That's not what you asked, Todoroki replies. Izuku cranes his neck to look at him. It isn't. I don't know what your situation is or why you and Bakugo don't get along, Todoroki tells him. If you think you could have done better, then that's fine. You know better than I do. But you asked me if I thought less of you for it, and I don't. I could have done more, Izuku admits. Then do more, next time, Todoroki replies, simple as that. He pauses and Izuku finally shifts over to see his friend sitting with his knees to his chest, picking at the grass at his feet. Though he hesitates again. You were the one who told me that avoiding things that hurt you isn't weakness, weren't you? Only if I have a choice. You did, Todoroki says. So did Bakugo, and he made it. Not your fault, it was a crap choice. Izuku huffs out a laugh and sits up, wincing when cool air touches his back. Yeah, it was a pretty terrible plan. I wouldn't go that far. Technically it worked. At this, Izuku jerks his head around to stare at him in confusion. Huh? You said his plan was to lead All Might around by the nose while you stayed out of the way, Todoroki points out. I don't see why he's so upset. You followed his plan exactly, and it worked. Izuku laughs. It starts as a surprised little short, and in the next moment he's curling over and wheezing a little because honestly, he never thought of it that way. It's not a justification that Bakugo would ever accept, not in a million years, but Izuku will take it. And it's consolation coming from Todoroki, which somehow makes it mean more. Ready to go again? Todoroki asks once he's done. Sure, give me a second. Izuku retrieves his water bottle for one more drink. Just a couple more rounds, I think. I don't want to be too tired for tomorrow. Todoroki blinks at him for a moment before he seems to remember. Ah. You taking Kirishima up on his invitation? Yeah. Izuku allows himself an excited little grin. I don't think I've ever hung out at the mall with friends before. Oh, Todoroki says awkwardly, and Izuku remembers that Todoroki probably hasn't hung out at the mall with friends before, either. Well, have fun. You not coming? Izuku tries not to sound too crestfallen. It's my last chance to visit my mother before we leave, Todoroki explains, and the apologetic tone in his voice makes Izuku feel unreasonable and whiny. Oh, I'm glad, he says, and is not sure if there's a tactful way to say sorry if my need for validation makes you feel like you have to apologize for taking the time to further repair your relationship with your mom, but is sure that if he tries to find it, he'll only embarrass both of them. Luckily, tact isn't a requirement for launching the first punch in a sparring match. Sometimes the nice things in life don't require words. The Kiyasha Ward Mall is even cooler than Eiichiro expected. To start with, it's massive. When they say it has the most shops of any mall in the prefecture, they aren't kidding. Eiichiro wouldn't be surprised if it has more shops than the rest of them put together. He counts at least 4 distinct levels, and they are all pretty jam-packed. Not that that's much of a surprise, it's the start of summer, and this place is a pretty sweet hangout for kids getting out of school. Holy hell, is he glad to be here. Thank God for Aizawa-sensei and his logical ruses. Almost the whole class is here. Kaminari, Ashida, and Satu are especially psyched, and so is Eiichiro. Ida's already trying in vain to corral everyone into something resembling order, but the mall is crowded and everyone's hearing the siren call of the surrounding shops, food stands, and kiosks. Eiichiro already has his sights set on something to buy, but is not quite ready to run off just yet. He does a quick sweep of the area to see if anyone else is showing up. It looks like not everybody who said they were coming made it, which is a shame. He was really hoping to talk to. Hey, Kirishima. He startles in place and looks over his shoulder to find Midoriya standing there as if he's been there the entire time. Oh hey, dude. I was wondering if you were gonna make it. Wouldn't miss it. Midoriya smiles back, but there's a nervousness in his face that Eiichiro can't deny. You okay? Eiichiro steps closer and lowers his voice, just in case Midoriya isn't comfortable with him broadcasting his emotional state to the rest of the group. I meant what I said before. Bakugo isn't coming. Oh, yeah, I believe you. Midoriya's grin brightens. It's just, it's a little embarrassing, but I've never, actually, done this before. Eiichiro blinks. Done what? Why, you know. Malls. Friends. Hanging out. Midoriya shakes his head. Anyway, where are we going first? There's a whole bunch of places to choose from, and I have some ideas for what to get, but I don't mind walking around and browsing, because I might see something useful that I didn't think of, and I also don't really know my way around, but I guess there are directories and stuff, so that's not really much of a problem. Midoriya. My dude. Eiichiro lets his hand fall on Midoriya's shoulder, cutting off the nervous chatter. Chill. All is cool. Alright. Oh, hi Uraraka. Midoriya catches sight of a few of the others and waves. It looks like everyone who was going to come is now here. Bakugo is a no-show, and so is Todoroki, but that's all cool. Bakugo was never interested in the first place, and Todoroki isn't really the buddy-buddy hanging out type, unless it's for sparring, apparently. Hey, Kirishima. Midoriya speaks up again, and the embarrassed look is back. I have an awkward question. Hey, look over there. Are those UA students? As crowded and bustling as this place is, voices still carry, and Kirishima glances over to see a group of other high schoolers whooping and fist-pumping at them. Yeah, those are the freshmen. Woo, sports festival. Hot stunts. Wow, there are people who still remember us, Uraraka remarks. Yeah, Eiichiro sort of glad Bakugo and Todoroki didn't show up. They probably would have gotten mobbed. He can see Tokoyami surreptitiously hiding behind Shuja, and Eiichiro can't blame him. Third place might be high enough to attract attention, and Tokoyami's not really strutting his stuff in public kind of guy. Sorry, what were you saying, man? Kirishima turns back to Midoriya once the rowdy high schoolers move off again. You had a question? Yeah, Midoriya shifts from foot to foot awkwardly. Did you pass after all? The practical exam, I mean. I just remember Aizawa-sensei said something about remedial classes, but you're apparently going to the camp with us, so. I knew, that stings, but Midoriya looks so embarrassed to ask, like he knows exactly how sensitive it probably is, that Aizuru can't even be upset. Ah, right, that. Oh, I forgot, you weren't there when Aizawa-sensei told us. Awkward. Yeah, apparently that was another play to get us motivated. Turns out we are going after old me and Satu, and Kaminari and Ashida, too. Aizuru grins. I mean, there'll still be remedial stuff, but at least we get to go. Logical ruses, Midoriya mutters. Yeah, my brain's still a little scrambled. But hey. We are going camping in the woods and I get to come, so you won't hear me complaining. By now, everyone seems to have a plan, and everyone has a different plan. Jiru and Yararozu are going off to look at kit bags, Uraraka needs bug spray, Ashida's going with her to look at capping supplies, and so on. You have your eyes on anything, Midoriya? Aizuru asks. Wrist weights, Midoriya answers promptly. Huh. Like what the teachers had on during the exam? Yep. Midoriya nods. That's where I got the idea. They were weighted down but still free to move, and their hands were free. I think it'd be good weight training. Aizuru brightens. Well hey, you can probably find stuff like that in sporting goods, and that's where I'm headed. Did you say sporting goods? Hagakure pokes into the conversation. Me and Kaminari need good outdoor shoes, so we could totally head there together. Sweet. Aizuru brings his hands together. How about we set a meeting time and split up? We can get back together and grab some food when we are done. It doesn't take long to reach an agreement. Everyone is eager to run off, shop, and explore. Aizuru leads the charge with Midoriya, Hagakure, and Kaminari, for all that this is technically his first time visiting this place, so he doesn't exactly know his way around better than any of them. But he's still riding the high of his own excitement and relief, because even though Aizawa-sensei has threatened rigorous training, a class capping trip is still a class capping trip, and rumor has it that Class 1B is gonna be there too. Maybe he can hang out with Tetsu if they have the chance. So I know there's the super amazing sports store in here somewhere, he says. We might end up running into the others there anyway, cause I bet loads of us are looking for capping gear, right? Well, none of us have been here before, so Kaminari glances around at the sprawling shopping center and shrugs. Should we wander until we do? We could do that, Hagakure says. Or we could look at that directory over there. Kirishima joins Kaminari in scanning the place. Where? It's right there. Hagakure huffs. Where I'm pointing? Kaminari gives her a pained look. Hagakure, you're wearing a tank top. I see it, Midoriya says, and his voice shakes like he's trying not to laugh. Hagakure sighs with relief and annoyance, and she and Midoriya lead the way to the sign. The shop they are looking for is on the second floor, closer to the opposite end of the mall from where they stand. Still, the layout of the place isn't too complicated. As long as they find their way upstairs, it should be pretty easy to get to. Of course, that's when they reach their first obstacle, an escalator roped off with caution tape and a brightly colored out-of-order sign. Ah, man, that figures. Hagakure blows a raspberry. Is there another one close by? Aizuru casts about quickly before his eyes alight upon a pair of double doors set into the wall nearby. Even better, there's the elevator. Guys, come on. Sweet, is it one of those glass ones? Kaminari keeps pace with him as he leads the way over, and they end up racing each other to be the first to hit the button. It's a close race, but Kaminari wins by virtue of gently zapping him when Aizuru tries to jostle his way to the front. It's a bold and sneaky move, and Kirishima can't even be annoyed. It is not, in fact, a glass elevator, but a normal metal one, which is a little disappointing, but hey. If the elevator ride was gonna be the highlight of their trip, then that would probably make it a pretty crap trip, right? At the sound of Midoriya's voice, Aizuru looks over his shoulder to find Midoriya hanging back and checking their surroundings. I'll meet you guys up there. Second floor, right? Huh? Aizuru frowns. Come on, don't get separated now. It's pretty crowded here, and you did say you've never been, right? It'll be better if we stick together. I'm not going anywhere, don't worry. Midoriya flashes him a quick grin. Just trying to find stairs, that's all. Can't skip leg day, right? The elevator doors open and Ajaru rolls his eyes as he catches Midoriya gently by the arm. Come on, dude, I know you're hardcore, but you have plenty of time for leg day at camp, right? Kaminari and Hagakyo are already inside, holding the doors open for them, and Kirishima tugs him in. You don't have to be hardcore 24/7. Third. Ajaru swears he feels the elevator shake when Midoriya catches the frame. He doesn't just hit it, he slams it, hard enough for all that he doesn't use his quirk. Shocked, Ajaru freezes where he is, still holding Midoriya's arm. His friend hasn't followed them and is gripping the edge of the door frame with one white-knuckled hand just to keep Ajaru from pulling him in. Kirishima, I will pay you cash money to let me take the stairs. Midoriya looks him dead in the eye and Ajaru is too shocked to form a proper answer. What? I'm not kidding, name your price. The desperate note in Midoriya's voice is what makes Ajaru let go, and Midoriya pulls his arm back like he's been burned. At the last moment, he sees Midoriya's eyes widen, as if he's only just realized what he said. He opens his mouth to say something else, then turns and hurries away. Kirishima takes a step to go after him, but the elevator doors slide shut in his face. Midoriya doesn't meet them on the second floor. Stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Izuku weaves through the crowd, bumping and shouldering people as he goes, ignoring all the odd looks he gets as he hurries to put as much distance between himself and the others as possible. His heartbeat rattles in his throat and fills his ears with static. Dimly he's aware of Rei close to his side, as she always is, but he can't talk to her, can't risk it, not when he's too addled to be discreet about it. That was stupid. He should have been braver than that. Or if nothing else, he should have been smarter than that. But he wasn't, and now 3 of his classmates know or at least have an inkling about something he's tried so hard to keep to himself, and they'll have questions that he won't want to answer because they are uncomfortable and pathetic and humiliating, and what kind of hero panics over something so harmless in common? He should have kept his head, he should have slipped away before they got close, he should have snatched his arm back before Kirishima could pull him in, he should have gone ahead and met them instead of opening his stupid mouth and giving them a chance to argue, he should have bitten the bullet and followed Kirishima in. It's just an elevator, a stupid elevator, not even a closet. Izuku sucks in a breath that hitches in his chest. Avoiding things that hurt you doesn't count as weakness, he said that, he remembers saying that, he remembers Todoroki telling him he said that, but it's so much harder to follow advice than to give it, even when it's the same damn advice. His eyes burn but stay dry, and at least that's something. Even if he just humiliated himself, even if he dreads meeting them again later because they'll ask questions and Kirishima will look at him with sad, guilty eyes like it's somehow his fault Izuku has a weakness like that, at least he isn't crying. It's a close thing. Izuku is lost in his head as he makes his way through the throng. Eventually his mind comes to terms with the fact that he has no real idea where he's going and no intentions that might help him remedy that. He'll have to get to that sporting goods store eventually if he wants those weights, or he could find Uraraka. Or Ida. Ida will be easy to find, with Tensei following him around like usual. That's it, he can find one of his other friends and follow them around, try to salvage whatever fun might still be squeezed out of today. If he needs to, he can always come back later, or buy weights online or closer to home. He just has to calm down. Breathe. Get his head out of this mess of choppy emotions and back where it's supposed to be. It's only when he starts to do that, that he realizes Rei is urgently swatting him in the shoulder and hissing. Izuku blinks his way up the haze and back to the present, just in time to avoid crashing into someone. He swerves out of the way with a yelp, earning a bewildered look from a passing shopper. Izuku blinks back, matching their confused look, before he glances back and realized he just clumsily pirouetted out of the way of a ghost. Rei jostles him by the shoulder and bares her teeth, glaring around him like a suspicious bodyguard. Faint alarm trickles into his veins, and Izuku follows her example to scan their surroundings. That's an awful lot of ghosts. The mall was already crowded, but the spaces between the shoppers are now filled with wide-eyed spirits, and their voices pitch above the white noise of conversation. Izuku can't quite pick out words, but what he does hear sends a crackle of fear up his spine. Moans and sobbing, quiet wailing, a few pitched shouts, all of them echoing in his ears and his ears alone, sadness, fear, anger, desperation, despair. The dead aren't happy. There shouldn't be this many of them, not in a place like this, and not so suddenly, unless a whole lot of people just died simultaneously nearby or... As some of them looking at him. Izuku checks the news app on his phone, but there's nothing of note happening anywhere in Kiyasha Ward. He scans the crowd, spots a woman who seems lucid enough in spite of the gunshot wound in her throat, and creeps over to her. He sees her face change from anxious fear to shock when she realizes he's looking at her instead of through her. Excuse me. He keeps his voice low, barely moves his mouth. Is something happening? You can see me. Her voice shakes. You can see us. Yes, so please just. You need to leave. She presses her hands to his chest and seems shocked that she can touch him. You're the one in the photograph, you're not safe, please, just leave before he finds you. Before who finds me? Her words twist his confusion into a tight coil of fear, and he almost forgets to keep his voice down. She grips his arms, and he feels her cold touch even where his shirt sleeves cover his skin. His hair dark jacket with the hood up. You're the kid in the photo, the one he's always talking about. You need to get out of here. Go home. She sees something over her shoulder, and her face goes a shade paler before she vanishes. Izuku chances a glance behind him, tries to be casual about it, and spots someone in a dark hooded jacket amid the crowd. Heart in his throat, he starts walking again. He uses the crowd to his advantage, or at least tries to. It's harder for him to hide in this crowd than it is for someone else to hide from him. But he tries to make do, decking in where it's thickest, taking roundabout and circuitous routes through the mall. His phone vibrates in his pocket, but he ignores it. He'll worry about that when he's safe on the train home. Maybe he'll make up some excuse about being called home by his mother. For now he just has to get out. He tosses another glance over his shoulder, and the dark jacket is nowhere in sight. He's not sure whether to feel relieved or more worried. Has he shaken his pursuer? Is he close to an exit? Maybe he can just. Rei shrieks a warning, and Izuku follows her voice to a nearby pillar. She stands next to it, baring her teeth at the spot behind it where Izuku can't see, and he doesn't need a warning clearer than that. He turns to walk the other way, and that's when his luck runs out. They are all clustered here, these dead, and that's how Izuku knows he's close, too close to save himself, too close to escape. There are too many bodies in his way, warm and cold alike, and the latter are so used to people phasing through them like marauders that they don't know to part for him. Move, 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 he pleads, and even at a whisper his voice is pitched with desperation. Please move. An arm settles around his shoulders, tight and heavy. No need for that. The voice is a familiar one. Izuku finds himself reaching for one for all at the sound, because what are laws and consequences to him when Shigaraki Tamura is close enough for his stale breath to waft so close to his ear? Before he can make a move, or even form a thought about what move he could possibly make, the arm shifts. In the next moment there are 4 fingers on his neck, rough and dry, with untrimmed nails digging into his skin. Clever you, spotting me so quickly, Shigaraki murmurs close by his ear, and Izuku can barely hear him over the static ringing in his head. Oh wait, that's not his head. It's Rei's here. Izuku gropes through empty air until she reaches back and clutches his hand. He can feel the bones in her fingers shifting, forming something long and misshapen and grotesque. Don't struggle, Shigaraki advises. We're just old friends catching up, yes. Just talking. That's all I want to do, is talk. Don't struggle. Maybe take a moment, breathe slow. Don't let anyone know, or else I have 4 fingers on you. You remember what happens when I add one more? The memory flashes across his eyes, unwelcome and sickeningly vivid. Aizawa-sensei's arm, the sleeve crumbled away and the flesh quick to follow. It's slow. The fingers twitch against his neck. What was that? Your quirk. He's good at this, at observation, at analysis. He can do this in his sleep, so why not do it amid the fear? If you could dust me with one touch, you'd have done that to Aizawa-sensei. It doesn't work that fast. Of course, he swallows, and no, better not do that too much, it makes his throat pop closer to that 5th finger. You had his arm and not his neck. But I'd give myself a few seconds at least to get out of your grip before it reached anything vital. It'd hurt, but I could survive. He is to pause there because he knows those chances are slim. And even if I didn't, I wonder how many heroes there are in the crowd. He keeps his grip on Ray's hand because he can hear her tensing, gathering herself, ready to make her objections known one way or another. He jerks on his grip until she looks down at his free hand and the words is spelling out at his hip, outside of Shigaraki's field of vision. Don't. If he panics, he'll touch. She squeezes back and keeps quiet. I wonder how many people I could kill before any of them reached me and took me down, Shigaraki answers, and Izuku has to risk swallowing again because it's that gag. Look at them, all those little NPCs running around. Like little bags of EXP. He sighs with something like longing. That's the difference between you and me. I don't care how many people I kill on my way out. He feels it, the panic coming in as inexorably as the tide, each wave bigger and higher until he's ready to drown. In his mind he thrashes and flounders, desperate to stay afloat, to keep his head above water and keep breathing. He's a finger's width away from being dashed on the ground. He's so close to death, he's never been so close to death before. The icy grip on his hand tightens and the chill spreads through him like thorny vines, reaching ever closer to his core. They prick as they go, returning the feeling to things that were otherwise muted by encroaching panic. Hope and joy are quick to drown like sparks plunged in water, but then the chill reaches his anger and it blooms warm in his chest. He's never been so close to death before. What is he talking about? He's been close to death since he was small. He's been surrounded by things that only he could touch, that only he could be hurt by, and Shigaraki is volatile and hungry for death and destruction, but he is not one of them. Shigaraki grips his throat, but Ray grips his hand. You are only a man, Izuku thinks. A man who eats and sleeps and breathes, and my friends are scarier than you. That's better, Shigaraki says. Come on, hurry up. Let's have a seat together, shall we? He lets Shigaraki guide him to a bench and sits down gingerly with him, mindful of how close that finger hovers over his neck. He can't risk a deep breath before he speaks. Sir. What did you want to talk about? You're annoying, Shigaraki tells him. I'm sorry. Shut up. His fingers twitch and Izuku presses his lips together. You want to know why you're annoying? Because I can't decide whether I hate you or not. He hisses through his teeth. You piss me off. But you know who pisses me off the most right now? The hero killer. That's reasonable. Izuku hopes his voice sounds as calm to Shigaraki's ears as it does to his own. He wishes he could control his own heartbeat because Shigaraki must be able to feel it with his fingers positioned where they are. It's partly your fault, Shigaraki snarls. Because you ran into him. You fought him. And now everyone's talking about him. His fingers tighten again, nails digging into flesh. About him. Why aren't they talking about me? Izuku keeps silent, not sure if that's meant to be rhetorical or not. Of course, if it's not, then he might piss off his captor by taking too long to answer. He can't risk turning his head to try to gauge his expression, not without possibly bumping his fingertip. That's what pisses me off, Shigaraki goes on. I did so much. Right? I released those Numu in the city. I attacked the USJ, I infiltrated UA, and nobody's ever done before, ever, and what do I get? Nothing. Nobody. Everyone only cares about Stair. His breath rattles harshly in his throat. Sorry, Izuku says. He's trying to come up with a plan, but all he can think of is exactly what he's already doing. There's no promise of help coming like there was at the USJ, or when he fought Stair. He can stall for time, but for what? He can't risk going for his phone, because Shigaraki is close enough to feel that, and there's no way in hell Izuku is luring one of his friends straight into Shigaraki's hands. All he can do is keep Shigaraki talking until he gets bored, and maybe, if Izuku is very lucky, all he'll do then is leave. Sorry for what? Shigaraki snaps. Tried to keep it quiet, Izuku says. Fought him in a dark empty alley and everything. No witnesses. I didn't even get credit for it. Shigaraki hisses through his teeth again, but he doesn't dig his nails in this time. Then why? Why does everyone like him so much? You might be asking the wrong person, Izuku says. He stabbed 2 of my friends and knifed me a couple times, and most people haven't had that happen to them. I have, Shigaraki snarls. When we told him to join our party, he stabbed me and Kurogiri. That must have been awful. There must be some reason, Shigaraki goes on. And you're no help at all. Whatever Shigaraki wants, he still hasn't gotten it yet, and Izuku scrapes his mind together and tries to wrap it around the question. He falls silent, watching the crowd. The dead watch him back, waiting, always waiting. They are wondering if he's going to join them. If anyone's going to join them today. Everyone is waiting for Izuku, the ghosts are waiting for him to survive or to die, Shigaraki is waiting for him to answer, Kirishima and the others are waiting for him to meet them on the 2nd floor, his mother is waiting for him to come home. He can't afford to keep them waiting. What's your favorite video game, he asks. He feels Shigaraki go still, and this time he risks turning his head just slightly. His first glimpse of Shigaraki Tamura's face is not a pleasant one. His skin is almost gray, with pale hair falling into his beady, bloodshot eyes. Tiny scars and nicks mar the skin, and his lips are chapped and bloodless. Izuku averts his eyes again. What? Shigaraki says at last. I know you like them. What's your favorite? His own lips feel dry, so he runs his tongue over them. Mine's Undertale. Shigaraki is silent and still for a few moments. Just when Izuku is starting to think he won't answer at all, his captor's raspy voice reaches his ears again, less of a snarl than a subdued mumble. I like BioShock. That's a good one. Izuku almost nods in agreement, but thinks better of it. I bet you always harvest all the little sisters, huh? You get more Adam that way, Shigaraki snaps. What's your point? People like a good story, Izuku says. Most people, everything happens on the news, not to them, so it's just a story to them. And a good story needs a good villain, right? He doesn't wait for Shigaraki to answer. BioShockers has Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine, and I guess, depending on how he play, you could end up the villain, too. He swallows against the tickle in his gag reflex. And all those villains, they all want something, right? Fontaine wanted money and power, and Ryan wanted to be free, Shigaraki murmured. He wanted to do whatever he wanted, without any parasites telling him what to do. For a split second the grip tightens enough to close Izuku's windpipe, but it loosens again. Free will. No stupid laws. Izuku can hear his teeth grind. That's what I want, too. What's your point? My point is that nobody can tell, Izuku answers and braces himself for a touch, for pain, but it doesn't come, so he keeps going. Everyone knows what Stain wanted. He had an ideal that he was working for, and it wasn't right, and his methods weren't right either, but he had that ideal. He swallows again, tasting bile. That's what people like. That's what's interesting. And nobody can tell what you want. You just destroy stuff, and that's not interesting. But I want to destroy things, Shigaraki snarls. I want to break the things I don't like. What for? The only reply he gets is silence, broken by the hum of activity around them. Shigaraki is quiet, thinking, and Izuku isn't sure if he's thinking about the question or considering whether or not to kill him. I guess people like villains who break things in order to make new ones. Izuku pauses. His eyes are starting to burn, and he prays that they won't spill over. Andrew Ryan wanted to make a utopia. Stain wanted to make a better world. He blinks back tears. Is there something you want to make, Shigaraki? The silence stretches further, and Izuku has run out of things to say. His analogy has run its course, and still nothing. Shigaraki is still here, the ghosts are still here, Rei is still here, and... I've decided, Shigaraki says, and his voice is brighter now. It's almost lively. I've decided. I think I like you, Midoriya Izuku. His grip loosens enough for Izuku to turn his head again, and he comes face to face with a nightmare of a smile. There's something different now, something heavier in the air, like a new layer to Shigaraki's eerie presence. It's barely a fraction of what he feels from most poltergeists, from what he felt from Stain moments before his fall, but it's similar enough to bring the bile creeping up his throat again. So Izuku does what he always does when death is staring him in the face and the fear is too powerful to trick. He parts his lips from his teeth and smiles back. Deku. Shigaraki's head turns to look for the voice, which is good because Izuku's smile takes on a desperate note when he recognizes Uraraka's call. Ah, so you had company. You should have said. I should have known your little friends would be running around here, too. The hand leaves his throat, and his grip was never hard enough to throttle, but Izuku's next breath shudders on the way and all the same. Rei hugs his arm, and that's all that keeps him from pitching forward off the bench. Now free to move, he spots Uraraka and Kirishima weaving through the crowd. Uraraka's phone is in her hand. Well, see ya. Shigaraki rises abruptly from the bench. Don't try to chase after me, you know what'll happen if you do. Aha. Izuku's head swims. Shigaraki. Yeah. What about all for one? His voice cracks. What's he trying to make? Shigaraki turns his head, just enough for Izuku to see the curve of his smile. Wouldn't you like to know? Maybe you'll get to ask him someday. And with that, he's gone, vanishing into the crowd. Izuku struggles to his feet just as Uraraka comes rushing to his side with Kirishima close behind her. Deku, I got your message. Whatever his face looks like right now, it must not be good, because Uraraka goes pale when she sees him. What happened? Are you all right? Who was that? Kirishima asks, twisting around to search the crowd. Oh, that was Shigaraki, Izuku replies vaguely. The wave is back again, higher and heavier than ever before. He's used up the delay. He wanted to talk. Can you guys call someone? If one of them replies, he's beyond hearing them. The dead are filtering out of the crowd once more, and Izuku knows that Shigaraki will be long gone before any police or heroes reach them. He makes it to the nearest trash can before being violently sick. Chapter 30. Midoriya, I am so sorry, Kirishima says, for at least the 50th time. For his part, Izuku simply nods. He could probably manage speaking if he tried, but for now he's content to wait until the cops get there. His throat burns from puking, and the skin on his neck feels horribly itchy, but other than that is none the worse for wear. It's certainly a step up from the last time he saw Shigaraki. Whatever else happens, at least it's not as bad as the USJ, or Stain, or anything else. Nobody got hurt. Mom's going to panic regardless, and Uraraka won't stop looking terribly scared, but it's important to focus on the positives. To do anything else at this point would mean spiraling into a panic. The police arrive quickly to secure the scene, shortly before his friends and classmates converge on him to make sure he's still alive. There's no sign of Shigaraki by then, as Izuku had expected, and he finds himself pulled away from his worried classmates and whisked off to the police station. Uraraka and Kirishima bid him a worried goodbye. Kirishima squeezes in one last profuse apology, and that's the last Izuku sees of them. Sakochi Naomasa is there to take charge of him, and that's a relief. All Might trusts Sakochi, so Izuku does too, though no one's bothered to tell him how and why they ended up as close as they are. He still feels safe around Sakochi because there's a cop and is All Might's friend, and right now he's one of the few people on the planet that knows at least one of Izuku's biggest secrets. Ironically, it's that very relief that brings on what Izuku hesitates to call a panic attack, because he hates to be dramatic, but what the hell, it's a panic attack. He's out of danger, he feels safer than he did before, and that means he feels safe enough to fall apart a little. It sinks him deep just how lucky he is to be alive, and Izuku has never been more glad that he can put his feelings on a temporary delay. Only Uraraka and Kirishima were there to see him stress vomit into a mall trash can, and only Sakochi is here to see him descend into subdued hysterics in the middle of explaining why the leader of the League of Villains didn't murder him. Sorry, he gasps out as soon as he stops feeling like he's suffocating on perfectly good oxygen. Small, cold fingers comb through his hair, and Rei's white noise falls comfortingly on his ears. Sakochi grounds him with a hand on his shoulder, a single point of contact connecting Izuku to the real world, like a string on a helium balloon. For a wild moment he wonders if he'll go rocketing into the stratosphere if Sakochi lets go. But Sakochi doesn't, so Izuku stares at the floor in shame, traces the edges of the tiles with his eyes, and finishes telling him what happened. He said he liked you. Sakochi's tone is neutral, and Izuku winces. I wasn't trying to make a good impression, he says. I just didn't want him to put his last finger down. I know, Sakochi assures him. You did good, you did great, keeping your head for as long as you did. He gives Izuku's shoulder a light squeeze before letting go at last. Izuku, miraculously, stays rooted to the ground. Now, I just have one last question, and I know it's been a long day, but I need you to think hard for me. Did he tell you anything else? Any kind of hint about what his group has planned? Izuku shakes his head. He sniffles a little, embarrassingly enough. Actually, it was sort of like he wasn't sure. Like he was upset about something and frustrated because nobody else was upset about it like he was. Like he was looking for validation. Sakochi asks, "Why, yeah, I think so." And Izuku thinks hard, mentally pummels his brain around, trying to knock something useful loose. I'm sorry, there wasn't anything else. Nothing specific, anyway. Anything more general, then? Well, he's got something planned, Izuku says. His hands are in the hem of his shirt, working at it in agitation. Or his teacher has something planned. She asked him, and he said maybe I'd get to ask him myself, so yeah. There's something, but you already knew that, so that's not really helpful. It's not as useless as you might think, Sakochi tells him and smiles. Don't worry. Even if there's nothing new to add to our intel, you still capped your head and capped collateral damage to a minimum, to 0, actually. You're a brave kid and you have a good head on your shoulders. I can see why All Might's taken a shine to you. Izuku's face feels wobbly, but he manages to smile back. Hey. Izuku. And then Ms. Nana is there in the room, blinking in and out of view. She looks normal and unblooded, so she isn't as agitated as she could be, but she still hovers around him, checking him from all angles. He smiles and signs a quick hello in his lap. Holy hell, Sprout, I'm starting to think I've been shadowing the wrong treble magnet. She finally stops flickering and hovers there, wringing her hands. Toshi's on his way, by the way. He's not quite here yet, but I got impatient and went on ahead. You okay? Izuku gives a tiny, nearly imperceptible nod. Something else on your mind? Sakochi asks. And no, he says. I'm just glad it's over. For now. They meet All Might outside, just as he's walking up to the front door. Izuku's still a little shaky from panicking, but at the sight of his mentor he forces himself steady. Not trusting himself to put on another proper smile, he smooths his face into a neutral expression. All Might's gaunt face is hard to read, but Izuku is pretty sure he can see relief in it. There's no surprise there, All Might isn't primed for a fight right now. He's powered down and his clothes are loose-fitting but not so much that they would accommodate his hero form. He almost looks normal this way. The touch to his head surprises Izuku and he twitches involuntarily. He doesn't mean anything by it, he's just surprised, that's all. He didn't expect it. But he sees All Might's face change just a little and he realizes that his teacher's mistaking it for a flinch, an indication that the touch is unwelcome. It's not. He feels All Might's hand start to leave and he leans forward to chase it before he can stop himself. It's embarrassing, even more embarrassing than getting spooked by a simple touch to the head, and he shuts his eyes. All Might hesitates a split second more, then gently ruffles his hair. Izuku cants his head into the touch again and tries not to feel too pathetic. I'm glad you're all right, his mentor tells him. And I'm sorry I wasn't there to help you. I think I messed up, he says. HM. Izuku catches his lower lip between his teeth. I've decided. I think like you, Midoriya Izuku. I think I helped him, he says, and tries not to think of the manic smile on Shidaraki's face, his cheerful, almost friendly tone as they parted ways. And not in a good way. I wanted to buy time, and I figured I could do that by just telling him what he wanted to hear. But I think I made everything worse. He swallows hard. And I've made him notice me. And I know you said before that you wanted me to announce myself, but not like this. Not to someone like him. It couldn't be helped, Munchkin, Nana says gently, and All Might's hand slides to the back of his head and rests there. You kids have been in the spotlight ever since Toshi signed on as a teacher. And I know you can't help being you. That's the trouble with power like ours, All Might says, before Nana is quite finished speaking. It's loud and bright. It rarely gives you a chance to properly hide. That too, Nana sighs. It's happening so fast, Izuku says. I thought I'd be ready, but... No. The hand moves from his head to his shoulder. And I've been putting a lot of pressure on you because I've left this so long. That's my fault, not yours. He squeezes gently, making Izuku look up. And whatever you said to Shigaraki, whatever that caused, it was only one conversation, my boy. I guarantee that what you said to him won't make him do anything he wouldn't have done on his own. You can't take all the responsibility for other people's actions, Sikochi adds. Especially villains. They are unpredictable and dangerous, and the best you can do is minimize the damage, as you did today. Izuku nods. In any case, it's getting late, Sikochi tells him. And I believe your ride's here. His mother arrives, fighting back tears and not quite winning. She's not alone, Marino and old Mrs. Matsuda are with her, flanking her like an invisible honor guard. And just like that, it's easy for Izuku to bundle his own worries away for later, because his mom is in front of him and she's crying and frightened, and it's easy to reassure her than it is to reassure himself. It's distracting and calming at the same time, and as Mom's tears dry up, he feels as if he might be able to breathe again. We decided to come with her, just in case, Marino tells him as one of the officers accompanies them to see them off. I mean, I'm not sure what we could have done if something bad had happened, but we figured it'd make you feel better if she didn't come in by herself. Officer Tamikawa is still within hearing range, so Izuku simply gives her a grateful smile. Where's the other one? Mrs. Matsuda nudges him. Even in a spectral state, her hand is still gnarled and wrinkly. Are they coming back with us, or what? Izuku blinks at her in confusion, glances around, and sees Rei flitting around Officer Tamikawa, fascinated by him because he has the head of a ginger tabby cat. Izuku points to her discreetly and looks to Mrs. Matsuda again. No, I met the other one, the old ghost says. Thought I saw somebody else with you. Some other kid. At his confused look, she shrugs. Never mind then. Must have been imagining things. Or some nosy kid hanging around and running off. It's probably nothing, but Izuku finds himself looking over his shoulder a few times as they make their way home. He could swear, a couple times, that he sees movement. Barely a full day has passed before Izuku decides that Mrs. Matsuda was right. And he is no stranger to being followed. It's sort of inevitable with the ability that he has. The dead get curious if they are lucid enough to focus, and it's not like they have anything better to do. So they do as they please, and as long as they aren't distressed or hurting anyone, Izuku is content to leave them be and let them follow him around to their heart's content. The thing is, though, it doesn't tend to last long. If they are lucid, then they forget him fairly quickly and return to whatever cycles of memory usually keep them occupied. If they are, then they eventually drift away when the novelty wears off. There have been persistent ghosts before, but those ones tend to be chatty, at least. If they are persistent, then it means they want to be seen and heard as soon as possible. 3 days of following is long enough to be an outlier. 3 days without seeing their face or hearing their voice is enough to get his attention. And lately, he could swear that the strange telltale noises and split-second glimpses are getting closer. Rei is just as perplexed as he is, and that's what pushes it into alarming. She's gone off to try and talk to them many times, but whoever they are, they keep vanishing on her. I wonder what brought this on, Izuku whispers to her one night when he's up at barely 5 in the morning. He's had worse nights for bad dreams, but he still needs to settle his nerves over animals on YouTube, and it's doubtful that he'll get back to sleep. How long have they been following us now? 4 days, she tells him, and points to a promising-looking thumbnail. Izuku selects it, and the two of them watch a woman give her Samia a bath. Izuku feels teased by the normalcy. He's been distracted lately because the mall incident is fresh in his mind and the school trip is almost upon him. Even now, his bedroom floor is a mess of packing. Life and training are checking along, heedless of the debris from all the bombshells that have been dropping lately. He's excited for the trip, but excitement gets lost so easily in his worries. He won't go away, Rei continues. But he won't show himself either. He's getting closer, but he's so slow. It's a he, then. I think so. It's funny, though, Izuku says. He shifts on his bed and crossing his legs when he feels his foot go to sleep. Could just be a coincidence, but I could swear it's been happening since the mall in Kiyasha Ward. Rei looks at him sharply, eyes dark and liquid. Flyaway strands of dark hair fall over her face. Could be wrong, Izuku says, eyelids drooping as the woman in the video explains the blow-drying process. But there were a lot of ghosts that day, following Shigaraki. Maybe I picked up one of them. Rei's eyes narrow. Why would any of them want you when he's the one that killed them? We don't know that he did, he murmurs. Ms. Nana said she recognized some of them at the USJ. She probably means she first saw them when All Might confronted All for One. If All for One's like a teacher to Shigaraki, then... I don't know. Maybe some of his ghosts transferred over. The video ends. His throat feels dry and his room feels far too small. Maybe the League of Villains just has a whole crowd of ghosts, and there's so many of them and they've been there so long that no one knows who they are supposed to follow and haunt anymore. It's not pleasant to think about, mainly because it reminds him so sharply of tonight's nightmares. His lungs feel simultaneously too full and too empty, and it's not until Rage adds another thumbnail on his phone that is jarred back into proper breathing. The video comes up before he touches the screen. Ferrets this time, playing in a box of packing peanuts. He goes out the next day, because it's probably his last chance before he has to leave for the summer trip. There's a dead woman whose young daughter lost her favorite toy somewhere in another part of town, and he would like to try and find it before he has to go. Rei comes along, for company and another set of eyes. He knows they are following him again. Or he's following him, according to Rei. Izuku can't catch a good enough glimpse to judge for himself. All he knows is that they are close now, but they won't talk to him, or appear to him, or do anything but follow him and vanish when he turns around. For an hour he wanders the street shops, scanning the sidewalks and alleys for any sign of a well-loved stuffed dog. Popal with floppy ears, that was what Mrs. Shidiyama had told him. There's no sign of it in streets or dumpsters, and even the shopkeepers and vendors can only shrug at him apologetically. Luckily, there's a park near here where Mrs. Shidiyama says her daughter loved to play. He can get to it quickly if he crosses a couple of busy streets. One of them has an underpass, so he doesn't have to stop and wait for traffic. It's quieter there, away from cars and most pedestrians, so maybe he and Rei can hold a real conversation for a while. Izuku hesitates as the path ahead dips downward, and he swallows against the sudden lump in his throat. The last time he ducked into an underpass like this, he was 14 years old and nearly suffocated on someone's slime quirk. It's not a pleasant memory, for all that it led to his meeting All Might, and he is combat training and a quirk now, but he would still feel better avoiding that sort of thing. Wait here. Rei, ever helpful, does a quick check for him and comes back to give him the all clear. Izuku's heart lightens and he jots down to pass through it as quickly as he can. It's not cramped enough to spook him, but the faster he gets to the other side, the better. In the end, he doesn't know what triggers it. Maybe it's how isolated it is, the underpass is empty of people both living and dead. Maybe it's the darkness or the closeness of the walls and ceiling. Or maybe it's finally had enough time to get close to him. Rei shrieks a warning and Izuku is hit from behind. He has no time to react, to defend, or even to break his fall. The blow sends him sprawling, bloodies his nose against the cement, and pins him there with a grit that digs sharply into his back. He hears another shriek, grating high-frequency static that drills into his ears as talons rake the back of his neck and wind buffets him from above. Rei screams in fury, and all at once the clawing weight is torn away. Izuku rolls over on his back, tasting salt and copper, and is just enough time to raise his arms in a shield before he's struck once more from the front. He scrabbles backward and nearly reaches the wall before the ghost pins him flat on his back and rakes at him with grasping claws. And the wind? Not wind at all, he realizes. It can't be. Wind doesn't sound like that, punctuated, rhythmic, almost like wind beats. Clawed hands close on his shielding arms, wrenching them away from his face. Izuku opens his eyes and stares up at the ghost. His breath catches in his throat. He tries to gasp, but his voice comes out with it and it sounds more like a whimper. Rei grabs the frenzied ghost from behind and drags it off him, and Izuku crawls backward the moment he can move. He drags himself along the dirty concrete until his back is to the rough wall of the underpass and he can say. It's impossible not to say. Blackbits stare back at him from a pale, distorted face. The ghost's form shifts, features changing and melting and unstable as it thrashes in Ray's grip. It's bigger than her and she has always been strong, but she can barely hold it back. Him, Izuku thinks numbly. Not it. Him. The ghost jaws hard as he struggles and reaches for Izuku, deformed and mutilated and familiar, so familiar. Nothing but rattling and hissing emerges, and yet, it very nearly forms a word. It's a word that Izuku knows well, one that he has heard all his life. Da-ku. With a desperate heave, the ghost thrashes out of Ray's grip and lunges again. No, crawls. He crawls to him, drags leathery wings that bleed black from the ragged membrane, and his hands aren't clawing, they aren't hurting, they are grabbing, clutching him, clinging to him like the ghost is desperate. Like the ghost is afraid. And why wouldn't he be? He can't be much older than Izuku is. Izuku is crying, and he doesn't know when he started, but now he can't stop, because this face may be older now than when he last saw it. It may be shifting, melting, deforming and reforming before his eyes, but he knows this face. Tsubasa-kun, he gasps. Zu Tsubasa. It's me. Do you remember me? The ghost clings to him until his claws pierce through Izuku's sleeve, and Izuku whimpers with pain but lets in. It's me, Deku. You remember me, right? Tsubasa screams, and Izuku shakes and sobs as he speaks. We were friends, he almost says, but they weren't friends, were barely even playmates, because Tsubasa either ignored him or bullied him the same as everyone else. We all played together, with Kaken. Do you remember Kaken? Tsubasa wails again. He looks so young, just a teenager like Izuku, and Izuku hasn't seen him since they were small, but he still looks small now, too small, too young to look like this. He's dead. The realization falls on him, almost belated. We played when we were tiny. He laughed at Kaken's jokes. He's dead. I knew him alive, I saw him and heard him and talked to him and touched him, and now he's dead. What happened? He chokes out. Tsubasa-kun, what happened to you? Deku, at least, that's what he thinks Tsubasa says. He clutches at Izuku's jacket. Desperate. Pleading. Deku. I don't know, Izuku sobs. I don't know how to help. Who did this to you? Tsubasa screams. Pain nearly splits Izuku's skull in half, and he curls up against the wall and presses his palms to his ears, but he can still hear Tsubasa scream. And then it's over. Izuku opens his eyes. When did he close them? And Tsubasa is gone, and only Rei is there, shaking from a few feet away as she watches him with wide eyes. I don't know, he whispers, and Tsubasa is gone, but he still can't stop crying. I don't know, Rei, I don't know, I don't know. All Might isn't there to rescue him, not this time. This time, Izuku sobs until his tears are spent, drags himself up, and stumbles back out into the sunlight. Tsubasa follows him home without a sound, close enough to touch. Eijiro isn't usually the kind of guy who stresses over punctuality. As long as he makes it before the late bell, he's golden, that's his only criteria. But today is a special case. He's a man on a mission. It's been less than a week since what went down at the mall, and Eijiro hasn't had the chance to talk to Midoriya since. They said stuff to each other, sure, but they haven't really talked. There just hasn't been time or a good moment for Eijiro to pull the guy aside. Midoriya's been quiet and jumpy ever since then, looking over his shoulder like he thinks someone's following him, and Eijiro doesn't blame him at all. If he blames anybody, it's his own damn self. So he sets his alarm for the morning of the school trip, and for once he actually gets up the first time around, instead of rolling over and hitting snooze. He drags himself up, stumbles like a zombie through getting his stuff together, and gets to school 20 minutes earlier than he usually would. He isn't surprised to see that Ida was one of the first, probably the first, people to get there. Dude's as crazy about being on time as Eijiro isn't. He's a little surprised to see Midoriya there too, especially since Midoriya looks kinda dead. He's got an even worse zombie look than Eijiro does, and Eijiro has to wonder 1, if he got any sleep at all last night, and 2, how the hell he dragged a full backpack and a big-ass duffel bag all the way here when he looks like a strong wind might knock him over. Dill twists in his gut, and he looks around. Ida, Yaoerozo, and Todoroki are also there, but nobody else. He has plenty of time, probably. Hey, Midoriya. He sidles closer, probably not very subtly, but it still takes Midoriya a moment to register that he's there. In fact, he doesn't notice at all until Aizuru reaches out to tap his shoulder. Midoriya startles at the touch, and Aizuru yanks his hand back like it burned. Sorry. I'm so sorry, Midoriya, I didn't mean to spook you. I'm fine. If Midoriya looks bad from far off, he looks even worse when he's looking Aizuru in the eye. Need something? Could I talk to you? For a sec. Midoriya blinks ellishly at him, and Aizuru adds, in private, I mean. Oh. Yeah, sure. Midoriya looks over to Ida and opens his mouth. Would be happy to watch your things, Ida says, before he can get a word out. Thanks. With that, Midoriya trudges to follow Aizuru a little ways off, far enough that anyone who isn't Jiru or Shuja wouldn't be able to hear. Taking a deep breath, Aizuru launches himself straight into it. Listen, I know I've said this a lot, but I'm really, really sorry about what happened at the mall. It's fine, Midoriya says. Aizuru shakes his head. No, man, it really isn't. I don't know what you're apologizing for, Midoriya tells him. You and Uraraka were the first ones to find me. And it's not like you knew there'd be a villain wandering around. Well, yeah, I mean after what went down with freaking Stain, I figured that if I received a cryptic text message from you then it probably meant you were in a jam. Aizuru shrugs uncomfortably. And anyway, I wasn't really apologizing for Shigaraki, more just before that. Midoriya's eyes lose focus for a moment. Before. He takes the plunge. The elevator. Something about the way Midoriya's face shifts reminds Aizuru of heavy vault doors slamming. Oh, he says. That. Why you don't have to tell me anything about it? Aizuru says quickly. Really? I'm sorry for pulling on you like that. And freaking you out. I think if I hadn't done that then maybe you wouldn't have had to run off, and you wouldn't have, you know. He shrugs again, feeling helpless and awkward. I should have paid more attention. I don't like people to know, Midoriya says softly. I won't tell anyone. Aizuru almost trips over himself to assure him. Of course I wouldn't, that'd be the opposite of manly. Lips are sealed, promise. I don't mean I don't like people to know, so I hide it, so you couldn't have known, Midoriya tells him. You're not a mind reader, Kirishima. Midoriya. Dude. Aizuru sighs heavily. That's kinda not what I'm going for. I'm looking for something more along the lines of I accept your apology, not telling me there's nothing to apologize for. His friend gives him an exhausted smile. Okay, Kirishima, I accept your apology. Aizuru lets out a breath and his shoulders slump as the air leaves him. Okay then. Cool. Good. I'm usually okay with tunnels, Midoriya continues. Huh? I mean, Midoriya shifts from foot to foot. I'm usually, fine. If I'm moving somewhere and it's not too small. I just don't like being somewhere that's really small when I can't go anywhere. So like closets. Or elevators. It's better if I'm moving through it. I still get nervous, but I don't, He doesn't finish that sentence. Got it, Aizuru says. Thanks. For telling me. Thanks for understanding, I guess. Hey, understanding's the easy part. Aizuru manages to grin at him. So, are we cool? Another owlish blink. Were we not cool at some point? I mean, I dunno. This conversation is starting to devolve into them asking each other questions. The twin almost yanking you into an elevator, and like me being friends with Bakudo, I guess I'm never really sure. Midoriya frowns, confused. You can be friends with Bakudo if you want. And it is a relief to hear him say that, and mean it, because that's been bothering him ever since the final exams. Hell, even before that he wasn't quite sure. Are you sure? His worries overflow and spill out before he can stop them. Because I like to think we're brothers too, you and me, but Bakudu kinda isn't super great to you, and I completely don't like that he treats you like that, but there's other stuff I do like about him, and I hope you know it's not all across the board approval with me. If that makes sense. It's his turn to shift a little on his feet. I know it's super awkward to be friends with people who hang out with people you don't like, sir. Kirishima, I'm glad you're friends with Bakudo, Midoriya tells him bluntly, and Aizuru has to stare. Oh. Ah, really? I don't get Bakudo's problems, Midoriya tells him, and for a moment he looks tired again, even more tired than before, if that's even possible. I know he has them, and I sort of know what they are, but I don't know how to fix them. And we used to be friends, but we're not anymore, and there's just too much bad stuff between us at this point for us to go back, and sometimes I wish I could help him, but I can't, and I don't know what'll happen if I try. I don't think I'm the right person. He meets Aizuru's eyes, briefly. You might be, though. Aizuru's breath itches. Dude, Midoriya shuts his eyes, shakes his head vigorously. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. Aizawa-sensei, he said he was wrong to make somebody else's growth my problem, so I shouldn't do that to you. But, God, he looks tired. Aizuru hopes he can catch some sleep on the bus ride. He listens to you. And you're a really good person. So yeah, I'm glad you're friends with him. Aizuru purses his lips and wow, he kind of wants to cry all of a sudden, isn't that weird? I'm really glad, man, he says. And listen, I know he gives you a hard time, like, all the time, so if you ever need me to, I dunno, step in. Just let me know. I'll try and keep an eye out, but yeah. Midoriya blinks and his eyes go a little cloudy for a moment. Could I ask a favor? I mean, I literally just said that, dude. I wanted to ask him something, Midoriya says. I don't know if he'll answer me. I don't even know if he'll answer you, but there's just something that's been bothering me. Okay, Aizuru says, nodding. What is it? Midoriya hesitates for a second and his face freezes blank. We fell out of touch when we were little, but before that, we had sort of a mutual friend. I haven't heard from him in a while, and I've just been wondering what happened to him. Where he went. Want me to ask after him for you? Aizuru offers. I can totally do that. What's the guy's name? Tsubasa, Midoriya whispers at first, too softly for Aizuru to hear, then coughs and tries again. His name was Tsubasa. Just could you see if Bakudu knows anything about where he ended up? No problem. Aizuru says eagerly. I'll see if I can slip that into a conversation, all sneaky and stuff. His friend gives him another tired smile. Thanks, Kirishima. No problem, buddy. Miracle of miracles, the smile stays where it is, and there's not a single trace of baby eating in it. For what it's worth, I'm really glad we are friends, too. Aizuru chokes up. The smile doesn't last long after that, and Aizuru's sorry to see it go. Midoriya spends the rest of the morning dozing on his feet as they wait for the rest of the class to arrive, apparently deaf to Ida's worried fussing about getting proper rest every night. And really, has Ida met Midoriya? Guy wouldn't know a proper night's rest if it jumped up and bit him. Aizuru chances a glance over his shoulder when they are all settled in on the bus, and he can't help but grin a little at what he sees. The engine isn't even warm yet, and Midoriya's comped out on Todoroki's shoulder. Utterly dead to the world. It is undeniably adorable, especially when Todoroki looks so confused about it. He ends up staring long enough for Todoroki to glance up and notice him. Aizuru flashes him a grin and a thumbs up, and the two of them share a commiserating look from halfway across the bus. Midoriya may be strong as hell, but that just means looking out for him has to be a team effort. Chapter 31. Izuku doesn't dream, and that is a rare luxury for him. He falls asleep almost the moment he sits down next to Todoroki, out like a light before he can even register the gentle rocking of the bus. He's vaguely aware of something warm pressed against his face, familiar soft laughter around him, and voices talking amongst themselves in the far, far distance, but for the most part he drifts in darkness. Someone pokes him at some point, but it's not enough to bring him back up. A hand on his shoulder, shaking him lightly but firmly, is nearly enough but not quite. Midoriya. Wake up! Todoroki, what did you even do to him? I didn't. It's probably because he's on your warm side, Kira. I bet he's super comfortable right now. Ah, so cute. A light swat against his head jerks him awake, and Izuku is suddenly and bewilderingly aware of things once more. The bus has stopped moving, and he sits up to find most of the seats empty. Todoroki is still next to him, watching him with a perplexed expression. Ashida, Tsuyu, Sira, and Kaminari are standing around them, all three of them grinning. Ashida stifles a laugh. Sleep okay? Sheesh, Midoriya, we thought you were dead. Sira shakes his head at him. Did you take NyQuil or something before you got on the bus? Who hit me? Izuku mumbles, rubbing the crust out of his eyes. Nobody. Ashida answers. We were all just standing here trying to get you up. You did kinda jerk awake, though, so maybe you drained it. We are at the first rest stop, Tsuyu tells him. If you have to go to the bathroom, now's the time. Izuku doesn't, thankfully, but he probably should anyway. Okay, I'm up. Sorry, Todoroki. It's fine, Todoroki assures him. Let's go before Aizawa gets annoyed. When Izuku hears the words rest stop, he imagines a few sparse buildings for shade, some public restaurants and vending machines, maybe a gas station. He sees none of these as he takes a few wobbly steps off the bus. Instead, they seem to have pulled over at a small viewpoint overlooking the forested mountains. Aside from the road, the only structure around here is the fence at the edge of the overlook. He sees Rei there, arms out as she crosses the fence like a balance beam. Ida Tensei is here too, and seems to be spotting her. Izuku's eyes run over a few other scattered ghosts, Aizawa's two hangers-on among them, before he becomes sure. This is not a rest stop. The phrase logical ruse creeps into his mind, and he is suddenly very glad that he doesn't actually have to use the restroom. There is no rest stop here. There is, however, a welcoming party, and Izuku finds his previous sleepiness falling away in an instant when none other than the wild pussycats burst in on the scene to announce themselves. All well. Half of the wild pussycats, anyway. Half of them plus a small child. Izuku can only gape at first, because maybe he hasn't actually woken up. Maybe he's still on the bus, 2 seconds from drilling on Todoroki's shoulder, and this is a vivid hallucination. Whatever. The pussycats are really cool. That's Pixie Bob and Mandalay, he blurts out, maybe to Uraraka, or maybe to no one in particular. The pussycats are one of the 4 hero teens that founded the Union Affairs Office years ago. They specialize in mountain rescue. Izuku blinks, voice trailing off, as he notices that more ghosts are here now. They do that sometimes, popping out of nowhere like they've been there the entire time. As Aizawa continues introducing the pussycats as assistant instructors or something, Izuku finds himself sidetracked, looking over at the boy who arrived with them. He's small, silent. Most of his face is hidden under the brim of his cap, so that all Izuku can see from here is the unhappy downward turn of his mouth. Izuku's eyes flicker upward again, to the 2 figures standing behind him. At first he can only squint and rack his brain, because there's something familiar about those two. Of course there is, when those vests are obviously hero gear, and no one knows heroes like Midoriya Izuku. And then recognition strikes, and Izuku can only hope it doesn't show on his face. It's not recent news by any means, the story is nearly 2 years old by now. But the deaths of pro heroes stay fresh for so long, and Izuku can remember hearing about how the water horse duo fell. They don't notice him staring, too focused on talking to each other, on watching over the boy. They must have had a kid, he thinks, numbly. Did he know that? Did that come up in the news reports, or did it get buried in all the memorials and sensationalizing? He tears his eyes away from them just in time to miss catching the boy's sharp glare, just in time to hear Mandalay say, the kittens who don't make it before 12:30 don't get to eat. Crap, I wasn't paying attention. A handful of his classmates are running back toward the bus, and Izuku almost follows them before he realized that many others aren't, including Todoroki and Yaoyorozu and Ida. Izuku decides it's probably safer to take cues from them. What did she just say? I spaced. He mutters it out of the corner of his mouth to Todoroki, and tries to look innocent when Aizawa glances at him like he heard. Base of the mountain, Todoroki replies, quietly without drawing attention, which is why Izuku asked him and not Ida. His friend is already shifting his feet, settling into a better stance. Something tells me we are not getting there by. Pixie Bob plants her gloved hands on the ground. Pillars of earth shoot out from beneath them like pistons, launching all 20 of them off the overlook and out toward the surrounding woodlands. Yep, same shit as always. Over the wind in his ears, he hears Mandalay shouting after them, something about a forest of magic beasts, and he is still very, very glad he didn't have to go to the bathroom yet. He rolls as he hits the ground, coming up with a few bumps and scratches but otherwise unharmed. What was that about a forest of magic beasts? Kaminari asks. Sounds like something out of an RPG. Ah, I landed weird, Ashida mutters. What was that? Pixie Bob's quirk. Izuku gently stretches a kink out of his back from the rough landing. It's called Earth Flow. It allows her to manipulate natural earth. She'll probably turn the environment against us. His notes on the Pussycats are in Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 8. It's been a while, though. If he'd known they would be involved, he would have dug the thing out of his closet and brought it along. Do any of the Pussycats control animals? Tsuyu asks him. She did say magic beasts, so. I think it's just Pixie Bob we're up against, Izuku replies, and the words are barely out of his mouth when the first magic beast emerges from the thick trees. It's hard to miss, being the size of a small elephant. It has tusks and everything. Or not, Izuku mutters. Shut my mouth, I guess. Except Kuda's animal commanding quirk does nothing, and Izuku sees dirt clods falling from its thickly built body. It's not just dirty, but made of the dirt itself. He sees it. Todoroki sees it. Ida sees it. Bakugo sees it. His ears roar with blood, with the sound of Ida's engines, the groan of Todoroki's ice, Bakugo's explosions, and the rush of wind as he activates full cowl without even a thought. The four of them tear through the Earth Beast in a heartbeat, and the game is on. The flash of dark hair and a white nightshirt alert him to Rei's presence at his side. As he vaults through the thick woodlands, Izuku finds himself looking to Ida, who paces himself to keep from leaving the others behind or running headlong into another trap. Tensei is with him, marking his progress, shooting a grin across to Izuku when he sees him looking. Izuku grins back, then looks to Todoroki and... Surprise makes him trip and stumble, and only a quick grab from Rei prevents him from falling on his face. He recovers his footing, then stares at Todoroki, stares past him at no. Not yet. He'll address that later. Pixie Bob throws obstacle after obstacle at them. It's ridiculous, she isn't even here, and yet she's fighting them nearly to a standstill. The path is much longer from where it had looked from the viewpoint. If they had been traveling unhindered, they still would have had to rush to make it by noon. It is, to put it mildly, utter chaos. They set a precedent with that first blow, and Pixie Bob responds accordingly. For every Earth Beast they take down, several more rise up in its place. With multiple attackers to face at once, the whole class is forced to break off into smaller groups to deal with each beast individually. The path ahead is unclear. Beneath the treetops it's so much harder to see where they have to go. The moment Izuku finds breathing space, he looks around to take stock of things. Bakugo is running on ahead. As per usual, Izuku can't see him, but he can hear the direction of the explosions. Weaknesses are beginning to show. Ayama already looks queasy from firing off too many beans. Satu only has so many sugary snacks on him, and with the constantly shifting landscape, Zero's having trouble maneuvering like he usually does. He could probably make it if he ran ahead like Bakugo. He's fast and strong and agile enough to make it through. But that's not how he does things, is it? Izuku hurdles feet first at the beast that Ayama is currently up against, smashing through its neck and taking its head clean off. As it staggers from the blow, his classmate runs clear and nearly collides with Tsuyu. They are not good at collaborating all at the same time, he realizes. So much of their training has relied on competition. And then, out of the corner of his eye, something moves oddly. Rei grips his arm in a silent warning, and Izuku turns his head to look. Tsubasa flies on broken wings, his bare feet and hands gnarled into talons. He's following Izuku, vanishing and reappearing in his peripherals. Midoriya, someone shouts. Distracted, Izuku almost slams into another Earth Beast, but drops and tumbles out of the way at the last moment. When he glances back again, Tsubasa is gone. Not entirely gone, though. Izuku keeps seeing him as they make their way through the forest. Gradually, he starts to sense the difficulty curve. Ever since they effortlessly smashed past the first beast, Pixie Bob has increased the pressure on them. It's not just more monsters, she's using tactics as well, herding them off course, changing the environment to get them lost, dividing their forces and scattering them in the woods. They've been out here for hours. Izuku doesn't know exactly how long, because his phone is dead. He doesn't know where about half his class is. It's the start of summer, and none of them knew to bring water with them when they left the bus. Deku, are you okay? Uraraka touches his arm. They have a breather just for the moment, and Izuku is using the time to breathe. Long, steady, controlled breaths just to get his pulse steady. He tries to reply, but only a dry throat makes it out. With her hand still on his arm to steady him, Uraraka looks over her shoulder and calls for Todoroki. Izuku follows her gaze and finds his friend standing by Tsuyu. At Uraraka's call, he looks up and jogs over. Cup your hands together and hold them out, Todoroki tells him. Izuku does so, and Todoroki drops a grapefruit-sized chunk of ice into his hands, then melts it to cold liquid with a touch. Izuku drinks as quickly as he dares and manages 4 decent mouthfuls before the rest of the water dribbles out between his fingers. Thanks, he says. Figured out that trick when I was 6, Todoroki answers and doesn't elaborate. Izuku's mind takes him to the obvious reason why a 6-year-old Todoroki would need to know how to make his own water, and simply nods. He glances over Todoroki's shoulder and meets the eyes of the ghost that wandered over to follow him. Their owner looks back, silently challenging him to say something, but this isn't the time nor place for that, because the breathing room Pixie Bob allows them never lasts very long. At that moment, the ground explodes as if by mortar fire. An earth beast twice the size of a rhino tears itself out of the ground, and they are off and running again before more come. And more do come. Eventually, Izuku looks up to a darkening sky and realizes that they are not making it for lunch by a long shot. It's getting on to evening, and their goal at the base of the mountain is in sight when it happens. Pixie Bob's attacks are beginning to let up, but with how hungry and exhausted they all are, it hardly matters. It's dark, and Izuku's vision is swimming when he blinks and realizes he's lost the others. Ray, he rasps. Ray, which way? Tsubasa pounces. Izuku is aware of very little, with his exhausted brain fighting just to take in individual pieces of information. Things like dirt and stones and roots pressed up against his front, the taste and smell of soil, the cold weight of a dead boy on his back, the sound of broken wings beating. He struggles, spinning out soil and leaves, and gives a choked cry of pain as claws rake his back. Sharp, stinging pain lights up between his shoulders, on the back of his neck. The back of his shirt is shredded for sure, and this is familiar. Why is this familiar? Ray screams, and the weight is torn from his back. Izuku crawls away as quickly as he can, flipping over just in time to see Ray struggling with Tsubasa. Both of them are contorted, twisted, and warped, both pale and black-eyed and screaming, and it's so hard to tell which is which like this. Another scream, and Tsubasa vanishes. Izuku grunts when Ray cannons into his chest, wrapping her arms around him, pulling him up to his feet and away from this place. Izuku reaches over his shoulder and feels the back of his shirt torn in several places. He's bleeding, but only a little. They are only scratches. They'll probably close up by the time he gets to the camp. The others might see. Ray pulls on him again, rattling at him in distress, and Izuku forces his leaden feet to move. She leads him back to the class, and he hangs at the edges, hoping the others will be too preoccupied to notice the state of his back. It's well into evening by the time they reach their goal. Izuku stumbles to a halt near the front of the pack, self-conscious but not overly worried. He's not the only one that got through that with damaged clothes, and there's enough of his shirt left to hide most of the welts and scratches that Tsubasa left on his back. Aizawa-sensei is there waiting for them with the 2 members of the Pussycats, plus the little boy from before. Luckily, the whole "anyone who doesn't get here by noon doesn't get to eat" thing was a lie, and there's an audible sigh of relief from Kaminari, Ashida, and a few scattered others. Don't know why anyone's surprised anymore, Izuku murmurs to the people nearest to him, who happen to be Todoroki and Uraraka. Yeah, Uraraka agrees. I'm pretty sure starving us would be both counterproductive and illegal. Todoroki blinks at them, then looks away without replying as Aizawa-sensei comes forward to address them. Midoriya. Aizawa-sensei's voice is not quite sharp, but it's about as hard and unforgiving as a stone wall, and he always manages to say people's names in such a way that makes it sound like they are instantly in trouble for something. Izuku snaps to attention, equal parts confused and worried as he mentally runs over his entire day to see if he can pinpoint what his teacher might be upset about. His mouth drops open. No, he says out loud. Somewhere behind him, he hears Ashida giggle quietly. We had your things brought up while you all were making your own way here, Aizawa says with a steely sort of calm. And I'm fairly sure we were clear on what was and wasn't appropriate to pack. Sensei, I swear. So imagine our surprise, Aizawa continues dryly. When your duffel bag started moving. From her perch on his homeroom teacher's shoulder, nestled comfortably in the folds of his capture weapon, Mika curls the tip of her tail and blinks her single eye slowly. Izuku has honestly never seen her look this pleased with herself before. I didn't bring her on purpose, he blurts out. I'm so sorry, I don't know how she must have sneaked into my bag before I closed it, but I didn't, oh my god, I didn't even bring anything to feed her with, He's in the process of working himself into a proper panic. He can see Mandalay hiding the lower half of her face behind one of her paw-shaped gloves. We have supplies for it in the dining hall kitchen, she says, and her voice shakes oddly. We may as well make an exception for circumstances, but it will be a responsibility to take care of her while you're here, on top of your training, Midoriya, was it? Yes, Izuku says weakly, face burning. He wonders if he can ask Pixie Bob to let the earth open up and swallow him. Excuse me. Like a godsend, Uraraka pipes up and brings everyone's attention away from him. Miss Mandalay, is that boy with you? It's a relief when the focus is off of him, but Izuku's heart sinks as he looks to the child again. This time the boy notices and glares back at him, unaware of the ghostly hands resting on his shoulders. My nephew, Mandalay replies. Kuda, come say hi. You'll be seeing a lot of each other while you're here. This time, when Izuku looks to the pair of ghosts following the boy, they see him staring. The woman blinks, looks to her husband, and then back to Izuku. UCS, she asks. Izuku gives the tiniest nod he can. Then he startles because over the course of that brief exchange, the little boy has approached him. For a moment, Izuku can only stare dumbly at him, at a loss for what to say. Ghosts and poltergeists and even grieving friends he can handle, but he has never had to talk to a living orphan before. He tries to keep his voice gentle. Hi. Kuda punches him in the crotch. By some miracle, Izuku manages to not curse in front of a child, but he still ends up on his hands and knees, wheezing with pain. Kuda, the ghost woman, cries out. Sorry. There are cold hands on him, steadying him before he can faceplant in the dirt. The dead man speaks closer to his ear. I'm so sorry. Are you all right? Above him, Kuda's voice sounds tight with rage. What the hell are you looking at me like that for, he hisses. Why don't you mind your own goddamn business? Izuku barely hears Mandalay scold Kuda as is gently helped to his feet. The water horses help to steady him until Ida and Uraraka move in to check on him. Aizawa glances at him with a raised eyebrow. Izuku quietly wishes for death, but all he gets is a quick once-over before his teacher apparently decides he's fine, deposits his cat into his arms, and dismisses the class. Izuku manages not to limp as he catches up to the pussycats and their small charge. Excuse me. Mandalay gives Kuda an exasperated look and motions toward Izuku, clearly prompting an apology, but Izuku shakes his head. No, I just wanted to say. I don't care, Kuda snaps and ignored Mandalay's furious attempts to quiet him. You just some loser trying to be a jackass hero, and I don't want your stupid pity. He turns and storms off before Mandalay can take in a breath to scold him. We are sorry, one of the water horse ghosts says, while his wife hurries after Kuda. We are so sorry, he doesn't mean that. It's fine, I didn't mean, Izuku suddenly feels foolish, standing in front of famous pro-heroes, scruffy and dirty with a cat in his arms. Why, you said the cat food was in the kitchen, right? I was just. We already fed her while you were on your way, Mandalay assures him. But I can show you, for future reference. Thank you, Izuku says, and he knows it's rude to cut her off like that when she probably wants to apologize for Kuda's behavior, but Izuku's dignity has taken enough of a beating already. She seems to understand and beckons him toward the dining hall. It's only as the class settles in that first evening, girding themselves for tomorrow's training, that Izuku can really take stock of things. His back still smarts and stings from where Tsubasa clawed him. He's not looking forward to the baths tonight, when people might see and ask questions, and quickly changes his shirt so that no one will notice the angry red welts through the rips in his old one. It means one more dirty shirt, but it's a sacrifice he's willing to make. What's more, hanging back in the boys' dorm to change and get Mika situated allows him a chance to address his earlier observation. It had been a bit of a shock, seeing this particular ghost here of all places, and now that things have calmed down and Izuku is alone, he can finally question it. Izuku can't imagine why Hino of all people would come, but here he is, as pale and sullen-looking as ever. Okay, I gotta ask, Izuku says, on his way to the dining hall. Hino apparently sees this coming and reluctantly hangs back for him. Literally, what are you doing here? What's it to you? Hino scoffs at him. Just because you can see me doesn't mean you have any say in what I do. Just curious, I guess, Izuku says with a shrug. You seem pretty dedicated to making Endeavor's life miserable, and I didn't think you'd need a break. He pauses. Not that there's anything wrong with needing a break. I guess even ghosts can get tired. I'm not tired, Hino grouses. Now that the number one son's out of the house for the summer, the dickhead's gonna spend all his time working. And unfortunately, his job usually involves preventing people from dying, and I'm not that much of an asshole. So I've got nothing better to do. I'm bored. Ray blows a loud, wet raspberry. You must be great at parties, Izuku says, and Erling walks straight into one of the water horses when he rounds the corner. Izumi, that's their name. It's Mrs. Izumi who meets him now, and her face lights up the moment she sees him. Oh, there you are. She appears by his side in an instant, and Hino promptly vanishes before he can be dragged into another conversation. I just wanted to apologize for what Kuda did earlier. You're all right, aren't you? I've had worse, Izuku says honestly. It's probably just cosmic punishment anyway. She looks confused. What? Nothing. Can I help you with something? He lowers his voice as he enters the dining hall. If there's a message you want to pass along to Kuda, I'll do my best. Aye, Mrs. Izumi looks hesitant. And no, not exactly. I just wanted to meet you properly and apologize for my son. This must be your quirk, right? Izuku nods as he slides into an empty seat between Uraraka and Ida, and the ghostly heroine steps back. Could we talk later? After you're done? Izuku glances at her quickly and murmurs, sure, I can talk before I go to bed. Did you say something, Deku? Uraraka asks. I said, can you pass the rice? Now that he can smell food, his hunger comes roaring in. Izuku tucks into his heart's content. It's all very simple food, a lot plainer than what he gets at home or in the school cafeteria, but it makes no difference to his empty stomach. Glancing around the dining hall, he happens to spot Kuda once, walking by with a box of vegetables. His parents follow him all the while, one on either side, and he catches their eye as they pass. Mr. Izumi's hand is on his son's shoulder. Izuku finishes eating quickly and excuses himself to the baths. In the shower, he clenches his teeth as he scrubs down, and the soap and hot water sting against the scratches on his back. He hasn't seen Tsubasa since they got to the training grounds, and is glad of that. He gets to the boys' bath before any of the others, and his eyes water as he turns his back to the edge of the bath and lowers himself neck-deep into the hot water. The scratches aren't anywhere close to serious, the blood had clotted by the time he was finished running through the woods. But still, it's better to be safe than sorry, and clean, hot water will kill any chance of infection. Gradually the pain fades to nothing, and the tension leaves him as his classmates gradually filter in. There aren't any ghosts around now, Ida comes in by himself, Hino is nowhere to be seen, and even Ray has gone off to explore the camp. Conversation washes over him like comforting white noise. Bakugo's voice is among them, but it's only one among many, and is much farther away than Ida and Todoroki and Ojiro and Kaminari. His stomach is full, the hot soak is working the aches out of his muscles, and is surrounded by people he likes. It's a nice feeling like this. He knows for a fact that training is going to be just as hellish as today was, if not more so. But for now, in this moment, things are nice. He doesn't realize that he's dozed off until his head drops forward, dunking his face right into the water. He comes snorting and spluttering to the sound of good-natured laughter all around him. "Dude, did you just fall asleep?" Kirishima asks. Izuku blinks water out of his eyes. "Nope." "Really? 'Cause you kinda just dumped yourself." "Wanted to," Izuku says, a little defiantly. "I'm pretty sure you almost drowned just now," Siro tells him. "Yeah, I'll have to try harder next time," he says dryly, and realizes his mistake when everyone within immediate hearing range gives him a bunch of worried looks. Embarrassment curdles the warm contentment within him, and he slips lower into the water. "Too dark." "Little bit." Kirishima lifts his hand out of the water and holds his thumb and forefinger a hair's breadth apart. "It's cool, though, I mean you do you." Kaminari sinks down until the water laps at his chin. "Guess it makes sense that you'd have that kinda sense of humor, Midoriya." The others laugh it off, but Izuku decides that's enough of that, and he isn't risking a repeat performance. He grabs the towel he left at the edge of the bath and drapes it around his shoulders as he rises out of the water, covering the scratches on his back, and wraps the smaller towel around his waist. After a bit of maneuvering, he ends up sitting near Todoroki at the bath's edge, letting the water lap up to his knees. It's still warm, but not so hypnotic that he risks drifting off again. Of course, Mineta waxing poetic by the barrier also helps wake him up. You know, when you get down to it, it's not about the food, or the pleasure, or the company, his classmate is saying, hands on his hips as he regards the high wall. No, there's something greater to be gained, just beyond this wall. Izuku squints at him. "Mineta, literally what are you talking about?" Mineta leans against the wall, presses his ear to it and listens, and Izuku remembers with a jolt that the girls' bathing area is right on the other side. "We are in luck, our bathing schedule overlaps with the girls'. I don't know if it's just an accident or destiny." "Are you serious right now?" Izuku says flatly. "Nothing in this world is more serious than this." Mineta doesn't even bother looking over his shoulder or lowering his voice. The girls can probably hear what he's saying. Ida steps in to scold him, but Mineta blows him off, calls him a prude, plucks 2 sticky purple balls from his head and starts scaling the wall with frankly astonishing speed. Izuku is already out of the water, ready to shout a warning to the girls, maybe Ararosa can make a pole or something to knock him off, when a small figure appears at the very top of the wall, right as Mineta reaches it. The look on Kuta's face is a sullen scowl. "If you want to be a hero," he says flatly, "then why don't you try being a decent human being first?" And with one shove, he knocks Mineta off the wall just short of the top. Izuku sees it from the water's edge. Kuta's hand is still outstretched as Mineta shrieks and grabs at empty air, and in one of Mineta's flailing hands is one last adhesive ball. It's pure bad luck that puts the two together, and Mineta's panic keeps him from letting go. Kuta manages one shriek before he's yanked off the wall. "Kuta!" No one but Izuku hears the water horses cry out and is already moving. Mineta lets go of the ball stuck to Kuta's hand and flails again as he lands on Ida. Izuku catches Kuta before he can land headfirst on the hard ground. "Are you okay?" he asks, but Kuta is too busy cursing like a sailor to hear him. Kuta, what hurts?" "It's my leg." Kuta snaps, looking far more furious than frightened. "I hit it when that stupid jackass pulled me off the wall." Speaking of whom, Ida's yelling at Mineta, and Izuku realizes belatedly that he lost the towel around his shoulders in his haste to reach Kuta. So much for avoiding awkward questions. "Midoriya." Ida pauses in his tirade to look at him. "We should probably take him back to the Pussycats." He looks at Kuta uncertainly. The boy ignores him and nurses his sore leg. "It's fine, I got him," Izuku says. He retrieves his towel from where it landed on the ground and ties it around his waist over the smaller one. "You keep doing your class president thing, I can take him." "I can walk," Kuta says petulantly, but Izuku sees him wince when he tries to stand up. "You shouldn't try," Izuku tells him. "It might be broken." "It's not broken and I'm fine," Kuta insists, but he doesn't squirm again when Izuku lifts him up and heads toward the entrance to the bath. He's almost clear when. "Hey, Midoriya, is your back okay?" Ojiro asks. Those scratches look pretty nasty. I'm fine, I just got caught alone by one of Pixie Bob's earth beasts, Izuku answers and leaves before anyone can question him further. Kuda falls into sullen silence, clearly unhappy with the current situation. Maybe it would have been better to let one of the others take him, but, well, too late for that now. Sorry about Mineta, he says. I don't want to talk to you, so shut up and get this over with. Izuku swallows his frustration. Vehement rejection really shouldn't sting this much. After all, he's used to people being determined to dislike him. Has he really been in UA long enough to be spoiled for positive attention? It's not just that, though. Kuda doesn't like him, doesn't want to like him, but he seems to have a problem with heroes in general, going by what he said earlier. Growing up, Izuku never heard anyone say "them as heroes" because everyone knew that heroes were cool. It was a fact of life. A hero was someone to admire. And yet this boy, born to two heroes himself, seems to hate the very idea of them. Thank you, Mrs. Azumi says, and Izuku nods. This wasn't exactly how we wanted a conversation to go, but... I understand, Izuku says out loud. Kuda scoffs. He's a good kid, Mr. Azumi adds. He really is, it's just... It's our fault, Mrs. Azumi whispers. We should have tried harder. But we died. Her husband shakes his head. I don't regret that, he says. I can't regret it. We stopped him. It cost us our lives, but we stopped him. If we hadn't done what we did, then a lot of people would have been killed in our place. People called it brave, Mrs. Azumi says, and her voice is so bitter that Izuku can't stop it from slipping out. Kuda looks up at him warily. What did you just say? Thought you didn't want to talk to me, Izuku says, and regrets it a little when Kuda shuts his mouth and looks away again. It doesn't matter if it was brave, Mr. Azumi tells him. Not to our son, anyway. The only thing that mattered was that we weren't coming home, Mrs. Azumi says. So, while everyone said that we were brave and that there was no nobler way for a hero to die. Kuda's father reaches out and tries to touch his son's head, but his fingers pass through without stirring a single hair. People forgot that it was supposed to be said, too. Izuku doesn't expect a thank you from Kuda when he drops him off and doesn't get one. He does get a cup of tea from Pixie Bob, though, and as they hover out of earshot while Mandalay tends to Kuda, he makes a few prompting questions that draws the same story out of her. A kid's parents are his world, Pixie Bob tells him quietly. But the rest of the world was praising their actions, celebrating them. Izuku's gut twists. He remembers that. He remembers joining in on that. He remembers thinking, I wonder if they'll stay long enough for me to be able to meet them. He's probably not too fond of us, either, Pixie Bob adds. But Mandalay's his only relative, so he has nowhere else to go. She pauses. We've adjusted our workload since then. We used to branch out into combat missions on occasion, but not anymore. We can't risk it, now that we have a kid to think about. But is only related to Mandalay. Izuku says. Pixie Bob smiles wryly at him. Mandalay's as good as family to the rest of us, she says. That's how it is with good hero tames. That's how it should be. Kuda's her kid now, and that makes him our kid, all four of us. And that means making the adjustments we need to make sure he doesn't end up with no one, no matter what the public says. That's messed up, slips out before Izuku can stop it. HM. Not you, he says quickly. I mean, the public. It's like Izuku puts his empty cup back on the tray. It's like the whole world was trying to convince him that it was a good thing that his parents died. Pixie Bob's mouth twists. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret my choices and I'll always admire the sacrifices that heroes make. But to that kid, the idea of heroes is senseless to the point of being unbearable, and I can't really blame him for thinking that. Well, nothing's broken, Mandalay says, loud enough for them to hear. You just banged it pretty bad. It'll leave a nasty bruise, but you'll be okay. Kuda doesn't answer. It would have been worse if you hadn't caught him, Mrs. Azumi says. Thank you. Izuku excuses himself shortly after that. By the time he gets to the dorms, clean and dry and dressed for bed, he finds most of his classmates already there, and nearly all of them are converged around his cat. Even the girls are here. Ashido is cackling as she watches Mika climb on Kuda's head, and several different sets of hands are trying to pet her at once. At first Izuku worries that she might get overwhelmed, but Mika seems to be enjoying all the attention. "Oh, there you are, Midoriya." Yaoyorosa waves to him. "Is Kuda all right?" "Ida told us what happened." "He's fine, just bruised his leg." Izuku glances around. "Where's Mineta?" "Ida dragged him off to Aizawa-sensei after you left, and he isn't back yet," Kirishima answers. He shoots Yaoyorosa an uncomfortable look. "We are really sorry about him." "It's fine," she sighs. "We could hear some of you trying to stop him, and we appreciate that." "That's why Kuda was up there in the first place," Uraraka says. "Mandalay had him play lookout for us." "Frankly, she shouldn't have had to," Ida remarks. "You know, I've heard rumors that Aizawa-sensei has the highest expulsion rate of any other UA teacher. I have to wonder what he sees in Mineta, because quite frankly his motives for becoming a hero seem poorly aimed. Probably because his potential isn't rock bottom," Kaminari points out. "I mean, he did pass the practical final pretty much single-handed." Don't remind me," Sira groans. "The fuck's it matter if his potential isn't rock bottom?" Bakugo snaps. "How the fuck's he supposed to be a hero if all he does is hump his way out of his problems like a shitty dog?" "That's mean, Bakugo." Ashida calls out. "What did dogs ever do to you? By the way, Midoriya, is your back all right?" Ida asks. "It looked sort of like something clawed you." "Nothing like that," Izuku lies. "I just got caught by one of those earth beasts earlier. I ended up getting dragged and it scratched me up a little, but it's nothing serious." "Oh, good." His friend is visibly relieved. "Be careful from now on, will you? We're outdoors and even the smallest injuries can still become infected if you don't tend to them properly." Izuku tugs up the neck of his shirt and nods. Shouder dawdles going to bed. Things have settled down. Lights out approaches and the girls return to their own sleeping area. Shoudo sits up for a little while longer because Midoriya's cat has claimed a place on his lap on the left side, naturally, and he doesn't have the heart to move her just yet. He's not the only one. The air is filled with quiet conversations as his classmates put off going to sleep. Midoriya's sleeping pallet is next to his, and his friend is still up as well, messing around with his phone. Someone throws a pillow at him, catching him in the side of his head, and Midoriya grabs it and puts it down next to his own. "You're not getting that back," he says without looking up from his phone. "Go to bed, Midoriya," Kirishima whisper shouts. "You already fell asleep in the bath today, dude." Midoriya holds the pillow back and puts enough of his quirk behind the throat to nail Kirishima in the face. "I'll be fine," he says, but turns off his phone anyway. "No you won't," Kaminari snickers. "'Cause we are never gonna let you live that down." Midoriya rolls his eyes and grumbles a little as he straightens out his bed. In the process, he notices Shoudo watching the whole exchange. "Stop grinning like that," Midoriya tells him, and that's how Shoudo finds out that he's starting to smile, just a little bit. "It wasn't that funny." "It was a little funny," Shoudo answers, and for once he has to work to keep a straight face. He can't help it, the mental image of Midoriya face-plighting in bathwater is amusing. "I know it was a long day, but you might want to get more sleep if you want to survive the summer." Midoriya purses his lips and it's almost a frown but not quite. "I don't usually sleep that well at night." "Oh." Reluctantly, Shoudo lifts the cat out of his lap and gets into bed. Mika, not to be deterred, makes herself comfortable in the crook of his shoulder. "How come?" Midoriya flops down on his back. "I dunno. It's dark and creepy and mostly silent, and there's nothing distracting me from," he gestures vaguely. "You know. Thoughts and stuff. I worry about stuff way too much, even if it isn't worth worrying about, and I end up not feeling safe, I guess." He shrugs. "It's pretty much impossible for me to sleep if I'm not somewhere I feel safe." And Shoudo knows that can't be quite true, not when he's seen Midoriya fast asleep just today. "Well, it's obviously not completely impossible," he points out. "You didn't seem to have any trouble falling asleep on me." "How about that?" Midoriya says. But he doesn't try to argue, and Shoudo hears his breathing even out less than a minute later, so he figures his point is made.